Smoke curled from the battlements of Dragonstone in the wan light before dawn, a thin gray ribbon unspooling into a sky the color of bruised peach skin. The sea below beat a dull, exhausted rhythm against black volcanic rock, each wave hissing like a dying coal. High atop the fortress parapet, Melisandre of High stood motionless, her scarlet robes stirred by wind that smelled of salt and ancient stone. She did not shiver. She had outlived every ordinary terror the world could press upon a mortal woman, yet this hour, balanced on the blade between night and day, always made her heart remember heat of birth, of flame, of ending. Her eyes were upon the dim east, though the truth of her gaze lay far beyond the horizon. She watched not the pallid clouds but the skeins of fate curling unseen through their vapor. Beneath her lids burned a second dawn, brighter than the first, where visions cinched themselves into shape. A stag crowned in fiery thorns, a boy with a wolf's eyes outlined in blue frost, a queen of ashes riding a dragon wreathed in dusk. They came and went on tongues of inner fire too swift to grasp. She whispered their names beneath her breath, a rosary of burdens. Every one would be, every prophecy true. The wind sharpened. Behind her, boot heels rang on stone. Ser Davos Seaworth paused a respectful distance away, touching 2 fingers to the scars on his neck before speaking. "My lady, the king wishes your counsel. War councils ride poorly when the counselor is elsewhere." Melisandre turned. Davos looked older than his years, the sea etched in every line of his weather-bitten face. He feared her and feared for her, both. She tasted that fear in the air, warm as spilled wine. "Tell Stannis I will come," she said. "And tell him the flames spoke again last night." Davos's mouth tightened around words he chose not to utter. I shall." He pivoted away in stiff propriety. She watched him descend. The Onion Knight did not believe, not truly, yet even unbelievers bent in time as iron bends beneath relentless hammer blows. Soon the world itself would bow, for every sign she had read from the first flicker in the pyre at Storm's End pointed to the same inexorable truth. Before winter ran its full death march, the night would try to swallow the sun, and only Azor Ahai returned could strike the spark to burn it back. She pressed her palm against the black stone merlin. Under her skin it pulsed with something like a flawed heartbeat, a memory of fire long gone cold. Dragonstone slept, but dragons did not forget. Nor did stone forged of their ancient fury. "Wake," she breathed into the wind. "The hour is near." Down in the courtyard, armor clanged and horses stamped frost-rimmed flagstones. Runners scampered past hedges of pikes, and the clangor echoed like clashing bells. Men prepared for war on mortal terms, tempered steel, sharpened swords. But war as the Red Woman measured it marched on with or without their armories. Ravens had already flown north, west, even across the sea, carrying messages whose true import no maester's cipher could blunt. The fires had shown her each wingbeat and feather, the citadel burning, snow melting on a blade of light, dead things stirring under golden crowns. Inside the keep, she found Stannis Baratheon pacing the map table. Painted lords glowered beneath flickering sconces, rivers jetting between islands in cold blue lacquer. Stannis's gaunt face was hung with sleepless shadows, his beard shot through with new white, but his eyes blazed. They always blazed as if his skull were a lantern and anger the flame within. "You saw something," he said before she could speak. He was never patient with pleasantries. "Many somethings, your grace. Their lattice grows tighter, threads converging upon a single weave. Speak it plain." She reached out, fingertip brushing the lacquered land where the wall stood. "In the far north, the dead gather beneath banners no living herald can read. The king beyond the wall will break before them, then bind to them, risen thrice over in ice, unless fire meets him sooner." Her finger drifted south to the painted mouth of Blackwater Bay. "And in the capital, a boy sits on a chair forged of swords. He is a shadow before a storm. His candle flickers. Soon it will be quenched, and the city with it." Stannis's jaw worked. "I am the rightful king. That is no vision, it is law. Law is brittle when bent against destiny. Yet destiny itself stands upon a razor's edge." She curled her hand to a fist above the Stormlands. "Lightbringer must be tempered." Across the table his knuckles whitened. "And you still claim I must do what that tale demands? Plunge steel into the heart of one I love." She heard the shiver beneath the iron. "I claim only what the Lord shows me. The sacrifice will unmake darkness. From the smoke it will rise, a sword to set the world ablaze with dawn. His eyes slid to the door that led toward chambers where a child slept. Leave me. She inclined her head and moved away, robes whispering. She left him caught between two wars, the one of swords and banners and the one of souls and shadows. In the corridor, the torches hissed and guttered. The black gate of Night Fort rasped open beneath Jon Snow's gloved palm. It was midnight on the wall, though the sky refused total dark. A shimmering curtain of emerald and violet danced across the void, crackling like unseen parchment burning. Castle Black lay silent behind him, only Ghost padded at his heel, a pale wraith against deeper gloom. Jon's breath plumed. Each exhale felt heavier than the last, as if some distant weight pressed on his lungs, the weight of millions unborn who would never draw such breath if he faltered. He paused at the threshold, stroking Ghost's head. The direwolf's red eyes shimmered in aurora light. Beyond the gate, the forest crouched, a mass of twisting arms laden with blue-tinted snow. We ride south at first light, Jon whispered. March the whole realm north if I must, but I will not let them break through. Yet even as he spoke, he knew the wall was not their true shield. Prophetic fire, not frozen stone, would hold the long night back. He had heard stories in the common tongue of Melisandre's visions. Tales carried on the backs of wildlings turned brothers and sisters. Jon did not trust the Red Woman, but he had seen too many dead rise to scorn any promise of flame. Ghost's fur bristled. A shape moved between pines. Tall, gaunt, eyes blue as a glacier's heart. The others were scouts tonight, testing. Jon drew Longclaw. Valyrian steel whispered hungry in the cold. The other raised its crystalline sword, and moon glimmer crawled along glass edges. Ghost lunged first. Jon followed. Steel kissed ice in a shower of ghost-white sparks. When the creature shattered under moonlight, Jon felt no triumph. One scout slain meant 100 stirring behind it. And he had glimpsed, just for an instant, the void beyond those blue eyes, a promise that death itself was marching, slow and unalterable. Far away in Meereen, Daenerys Targaryen broke her fast beneath a silk pavilion embroidered with dragons that wriggled gold-bright when the breeze slipped in. Drogon sprawled outside, great wings beating dust from the scorched hillside. The city lay below, pyramids rising like titans drowned to their shoulders in a river of mubrick hovels. At dawn the shadow of the harpy had stretched across the water, but now the bronze colossus smoldered still, wings melted to slag. The slaver's fleet smoldered beside it, an iron graveyard bleaching in sea salt. Daenerys pressed bread to her lips, yet her eyes never left the horizon. He calls, she murmured. Missandei, pouring wine, tilted her head. Your Grace. The dragon. Not Drogon, another. Or perhaps the same from another time. I feel him in my bones. He's waking. She rubbed her palm over her stomach, where phantom heat coiled. Yesterday she had dreamed of a black egg cracking under thunder, spilling not a hatchling but a blaze of red fire. The flames had whispered her brother's name, though she knew Rhaegar lay dust beneath the trident. Ser Barristan Selmy, arriving, overheard her last words. His white hair gleamed in the morning. Your Grace, sailors swear they have seen dragons in the Shadowlands beyond high, older and far larger than any living memory. Some claim they never died, merely slept. And some claim the moon cracked open and spilled them, she said softly. Yet my dreams do not lie. The world is stirring. I feel winter's hand even here, in this furnace of a land. Barristan bowed. Then we must cross the sea before that hand closes. Daenerys touched the hilt of her rack. And what waits on the far shore will burn or bend. I will take the Iron Throne, or I will leave only ash. Unseen, the Red Woman's words drifted on currents of thought Daenerys could not name. Prophecies rivers were joining, each tributary feeding into one roaring flood. At Riverrun, Arya Stark watched Edmure's sun tumble reeds into a pool, a tiny battle of make-believe. Nightingales called in alder trees, but every note echoed with cages and chains. She no longer answered to Cat of the Canals or no one. She was Arya, the wolf. Yet even a wolf could smell winter on the wind, fear riding the breeze like a second scent. She tossed a coin across her knuckles, iron, freshly stamped in bravos, not the iron coin of Jaqen Hagar, and wondered what debt it might yet pay. When she looked into the water, she half expected to see other faces swirl beneath hers. The girl she once was, the girl she never became, the Deathgiver trained in dark halls of the House of Black and White. Instead she saw embers, shifting shapes that might have been flames. A whisper rose, too faint to name. A red gaze staring through leagues of night to fix upon her soul. Come to me. We have work. Arya blinked and the ripples stilled. She stood, sliding needle through her belt. Whatever work awaited, she would do it with a stark steel. In Old Town, the highest spire of the high tower scraped fog-bound around its crown. Samwell Tarly hunched over scrolls so old they sighed when unrolled, their ink crazed by centuries. Gilly slept nearby, babe tucked beneath her shawl. Candles were stubs, dripping wax onto stone older than any house in Westeros. Marwyn the mage stood behind him, broad as a bull walrus. "You found it," Marwyn grunted, voice thick with smoke. Sam nodded, pushing a parchment forward. A reference in Valyrian glyphs to the red comet that burned the year of Aegon's birth. An omen of dragons. And here, he tapped another script. A matching passage noting frost fiends stirring in the north the same season. Marwyn's eyes gleamed. Two halves of one coin. Heat and cold. Light and dark. Prophecies seldom come alone. Boy, they duel. Sam licked dry lips. If both stand true, then the Night's King rises while dragons fly. Or he already walks. Marwyn bent closer. We must reach the wall before the maesters bind these pages to dust. Knowledge must serve. He clapped Sam's shoulder. Pack. We sail on the tide. Twilight bled crimson along the trident when Catelyn Stark stepped from canvas to riverbank, water lapping at her boots. The smell of iron in the air summoned memories she wished dead. Ned's head bowed by an executioner's sword, Robb's body riddled by bolts. But those wrongs were ghost echoes in her blood. Lady Stoneheart's eyes burned red now, strings of fate drawn tight by fires she had never beheld yet felt. She smelled something on the wind besides corpse rot and damp leaf mold, smoke from a distant pyre, sweet and cruel. That scent tugged her northward. She gestured to her brotherhood, silent wraiths beneath patch-stitched cloaks. Ride, she croaked through throat long torn by river water. The wolves must gather. Thus across the map pieces moved, each compelled by an unseen hand. In the free cities, the faceless men whispered of a debt unpaid to the god of death. In Sunspear, young Arianne watched the sky burn red at dusk and felt a spear twist in her palm. In a sky of dark wings, ravens circled paths older than kingdoms. They carried tidings no raven had ever carried, prophecies fulfilling themselves in flesh. On Dragonstone a red woman cast more flames, on the wall a bastard swore vows louder than any horn. Upon every hearth and every battlefield the song of ice and fire rose, a dirge and a hymn at once, searing marrow, chilling blood, promising that everything spoken in shadowed vision would breathe. And far north of even the maps, in that white country where auroras danced like veils, a horn of black ice lay buried beneath layers of hoarfrost. The wind began to sound through its cracks like a child's distant crying. Each cry echoed deeper beneath the world. With every beat of the great heart sleeping under snow, cracks widened. One day soon someone would lift that horn. They would not know why, only feel the imperative in their bones. And the horn would shatter the wall's magic like glass under dragon flame. Yet prophecy had already accounted for that breaking. Melisandre had seen the horn in flame and seen it burst apart in a fiery hand before it could sound. Whether that saving hand belonged to Jon Snow, to Stannis Baratheon, or to some soul yet unnamed, she could not discern. The future leapt between names as wildfire leapt from timber to timber. But she believed because belief was her marrow. The Lord of Light did not err. On a night when neither moon nor far northern lights shone, Melisandre left her chamber bearing a single candle. She walked to the chamber of the painted table. No guard tried to bar her, they feared eyes that saw too much. Alone in the vast hall, she set the candle upon the map and drew her dagger. Its blade drank the dull glow, edge thin as truth before rumor. She sliced her palm. Blood-welled, dark as ruby. She closed her eyes and let the droplets splatter onto the lacquered forests of the north. The candle guttered. She opened her mouth and sang, not in the common tongue, nor in any tongue spoken in Valyria when its towers were young, but in the language of first flame, older than men. Her blood hissed on painted rivers, writhing into shapes. She saw towers of ice dissolving, dead armies surging over fields of fallen banners, a child crowned in pale roses holding a sword of living fire. 1,000 images bloomed and died in the space of a heartbeat. When the candle expired, darkness swallowed the chamber. Overhead, a single pulse of red light bled through the gloom as if some unseen star had found a breach in the roof. That scarlet glow crawled across the table and set the pools of her blood aflame until the entire map burned without heat. It burned silently, islands and seas rimmed in spectral red, and the flames formed one word, familiar yet newly heavy, now. Melisandre bowed her head. As you will. In King's Landing, the Iron Throne's shadow stretched long across the Red Keep's hall. King Tommen Baratheon knelt before the Throne of Swords, small hands gripping a Lionensian scepter. Ser Jaime stood beside him, his golden hand gleaming. Cersei Lannister reclined on a cushioned seat near the steps, smile thin as the edge of a whetted blade. A raven hammered its wings against high windows until a guard unlatched the casement. The bird tumbled in, feathers ruffled, scroll tied to its leg. Maester Pycelle plodded forward, arthritic fingers fumbling knots. When he read the words, his face went as bloodless as chalk. "Speak," Jaime commanded. "My lord, my queen, it is from the wall. The Night's Watch begs aid. They say the dead march. They claim the king beyond the wall bends his knee to something older than men." Cersei laughed, brittle glass. "Children's tales? They expect the crown to empty coffers for snowy phantoms?" Jaime did not laugh. In his memory, he saw a girl knight swearing to return to Winterfell, eyes earnest. He saw a boy with burning sword fighting shadows, then dying in a courtyard flooded with green fire. Sometimes what seemed folly proved doom. Tommen turned up to his uncle, eyes enormous. "Is it true, Uncle Jaime? Are monsters coming?" Jaime knelt. "There are always monsters, lad. Some wear crowns. Some hide in stories. Our task is telling one from the other before it's too late." In the hush that followed, Cersei felt a tremor pass through the hall, a fleeting vibration in stone. She dismissed it. Hours later, when the floor of the Tower of the Hand buckled under a sudden gout of subterranean flame, wildfire caches forgotten since Ares, she would remember that tremor and understand it had been Prophecies' footstep. The green blaze swallowed a wing of the castle. Though bucket chains raced, the fire crept into hidden vaults where more wildfire lay sleeping. King's Landing shimmered under that budding storm, a match poised above oil. On the shivering sea, a Braavosi galley cut waves under torn moonlight. Arya Stark stood at the prow, salt spray in her hair, eyes fixed west. The water smelled of rust and secrets. Somewhere below lay a wreck older than recorded kings, its hull half buried in silt, rumored to hold steel forged from fallen stars. She wondered if anyone would ever raise it. Wonders lived and died unnoticed while men killed one another for inches of ground. But if Melisandre's whisper in the water was true, time for wonders had come. She traced her finger along the thin scar on her cheek, a memory of a waif's wooden staff. Every pain she had borne was sharpening her now, moment by moment, for some blow she had yet to strike. She didn't know how or where. Only that when that hour came, she must strike cleanly. The galley pitched southward. Behind her the Titan's brazen horn roared farewell, yet to Arya it sounded like warning. "Steel yourself, little wolf. Fate is watching." At storm's end, thunder rolled over fortress walls, ancient as storms themselves. Shireen Baratheon huddled by a brazier, reading by its glow. The stone dragon above the gate, long cracked, tail broken, seemed to flex each time lightning glared. The book on her knees trembled. She pressed a hand to it. Footsteps echoed. Ser Davos entered, wet from rain. When he smiled at Shireen, the candlelight made his face a landscape of scars. The guards mutter a red god when thunder strikes, he said, voice soft. They think Lord Stannis's weather is cursing. Shireen traced a line on the page. This talks of Azor Ahai. He forged a sword thrice. Twice it broke. The third time he used the heart of his beloved. That made Lightbringer. Davos's smile faltered. A hard tale. I don't like it, she whispered. But if the world ends otherwise, perhaps it's mercy. Davos knelt. Little princess, my boys died at the Blackwater wearing the king's colors. I thought my faith in him dead too. Yet your kindness kindled it again. If there's mercy left, you embody it. Remember that. Lightning lashed the dusk. Shireen looked beyond Davos toward corridors twining deeper into the keep, where her father brooded and Melisandre's shadows flickered. Something terrible weighted down those corridors. She felt it as goose flesh on her scarred cheek. Promise me, she whispered. Promise you'll stand for me if darkness falls. Davos took her hand. I swear it by earth and sea. The promise settled into the air like a stone into still water, sending ripples unseen. Far away in Dragonstone, Melisandre stiffened as if iced. Promises forged in love could temper or undo fate, her fires had hinted such. She added Davos's oath to her ledger of variables. She would watch. If he threatened prophecy, Shadow might silence him. If he served, Shadow might save him. Across the narrow sea, Tyrion Lannister rode a squat donkey through the ruins of Valyria behind the great hulking figure of Jorah Mormont. Blackened spires jutted like fangs from glassy ground. Fissures hissed steam that smelled of brimstone and rot. Tyrion recited verses half remembered from Maester's tomes, though each line trembled on his tongue. Valyria had been myth till this hour. Now, walking its corpse, myth overshadowed him as palpably as those ruined towers overshadowed the plain. They sought dragons. Not living, but a clutch of petrified eggs rumored to survive in obsidian vaults. Daenerys had sent them, her faith that prophecy wanted more dragons than 3. Dragons to face what rose in the north. Tyrion had read enough Raven reports to piece dread together. He had dismissed fireside foretellings most his life. Now the world seemed bent on making fools of skeptics. A rumble shook the ground. The donkey brayed, nearly unseating him. Yora drew his sword, gaze darting to shadows. From a fissure ahead spilled not smoke but cold so stark Tyrion's breath crystallized though the day was warm. Ice in Valyria. Impossible. Yet there it lay, creeping frost gilding shards of fused stone. A whispering wind wound up from the chasm, carrying voices faint like children calling names. Tyrion felt every hair on his neck lift. Even dragons could not account for this chill. Something older than Valyria stirred under these stones, something wed to the same death marching south. Maybe, Tyrion muttered, prophecy outran us. Yora glanced back. We should leave? No, Tyrion said, surprising himself. He swung off the donkey, boots crunching brittle frost. We find the eggs and we run, else Daenerys crosses oceans too late. He strode toward the fissure, every sensible instinct screaming against it. But a smaller voice, a share of his father's spine, perhaps said, move. All the game boards in Westeros were aflame. He must reach across a burning table and seize what chips he could. They pressed on, deeper into gloom painted by veins of blue ice where no ice belonged. Far north, beyond the wall, the Night King raised his hand. Snow swirled around him in worship. A score of fallen wildlings shook off death like water, eyes blooming the same cerulean flame. He gazed south at the wall's distant line, faint as chalk against snow-cloaked peaks. A murmur escaped lips long frozen, a tongue no maester alive could translate, yet its meaning pulsed in every icebound bone, soon. Behind him, monstrous shapes lumbered. Giants clad in frost, bears with hides of shattered glacier, wyverns of bone and rime. The dead stretched terrace upon terrace into the white gloom, a living glacier grinding inexorably forward. Each step they took hummed with a power drawn from something older than nights counted, older than the world men knew. Prophecy's dark half. The ice to balance fire. But prophecy had foreseen them, and prophecy had prepared fire. In the dead king's mind flickered a glimmer, an ember of foreknowledge as cold as it was bright. In that ember he saw a woman in scarlet robes standing on a beach of black sand, lifting a hand ablaze, calling a name he could not pronounce. He felt dread, and the emotion surprised him, for dread among the dead is as rare as tears among wolves. He closed his palm and the vision fled. He stepped onward. Snow followed, ravenous. On Dragonstone's northern cliff, Melisandre stood before a pyre built of driftwood and broken masts. The night was wind-torn, clouds chasing the moon. She lifted her arms. Lord of Light, cast your fires upon us now. For the night is dark and full of terrors, and the day will die if you turn your face away. Hundreds watched, knights, sells words, sailors. Some knelt, some merely stared. Stannis stood foremost, jaw hewn of flint, his daughter clasping his wrist. Melisandre touched the torch to the pyre. Flame flared upward, gold, then red. She spoke names into the roar: Jon Snow, Daenerys Storborn, Arya of Winterfell, Azor Ahai, Lightbringer. As the fire climbed, sparks spun high, swirling into constellations of burning motes. The wind caught them and bore them out over the sea like a flock of ill-omened birds. Yet each spark carried vision. One landed on Davos's shoulder, he flinched, and in that ember he saw the Blackwater again, saw wildfire erupt under his ship. But then something new, a shadowed hand dragging him from the green flames before they consumed him. He gasped, tears hot in eyes bleached by salt. Another ember kissed Shireen's brow. She saw a shadow sweeping over a white plain, winged and immense, and felt wonder bolt through her chest. Stannis saw in flame the wall cracking, saw himself raise a sword burning red-white, saw faces of thousands turn toward him. Behind them the sun rose through darkness. The pyre groaned. Out of its heart burst a single plume of fire shaped like a sword. It leapt skyward, cleaving cloud. Gasps rose. Melisandre smiled, lips red as blood. Lightbringer awakens, she said. All truths converge. The sword of fire burned a heartbeat longer, then snapped into sparks and vanished. Silence shrouded the cliff. In every mind present, the same realization bloomed, no road back remained. Prophecy had spoken its piece, and they, willing or not, were its verses. Fire had promised its faithfulness, ice its wrath. Between them stood the fragile hope that men and women, flawed, stubborn, yearning, might yet shape which final verse the world would sing at dawn. So began the long waking of every dream Melisandre had ever kindled in ruby flame. And so the weave tightened, coil upon coil, drawing kingdoms and exiles and dead things alike into one conflagration destined to outshine every star. If victory burned, it would sear away crowns and shatter thrones. If defeat chilled, it would hush every hearth. But not tonight. Tonight the sky bore witness, and the watchers whispered what they had seen, voices spreading outward like ripples from a stone flung into midnight water, until even the distant shores of the free cities trembled to hear that a sword of fire had climbed the heavens over Dragonstone and the world had changed forever. A wet dust clung to Dragonstone like damp wool, dulling every color until even the red woman's robes seemed rust-brown in the courtyard gloom. Smoke from the spent pyre still drifted in ragged curtains across the lists, and soldiers moved through it like ghosts, picking charcoal from their hair. Melisandre lingered long after the onlookers scattered, her gaze fixed on the ember-dotted ash where the sword of flame had risen. Most pyres surrendered tonight with meek surrender, this one still breathed faint heat, as though the timber remembered the shape of the miracle it had hosted and sulked at losing it. She waded deeper among blackened spars. Cinders snapped beneath her slippers. With a gloved hand she brushed aside a beam to uncover the charred stub of the mast that had perched at the pyre's heart. To any eye but hers it was naught but slag, yet she felt a pulse throb inside the ruin, slow, steady, bright as a ruby buried in mud. She laid her palm atop it. The heat met her skin like recognition. A shape floated behind her eyes, a blade dormant under slag, waiting for a hand worthy to draw it forth. Lightbringer lay unborn here, in hiding. Horses whickered near the stables. Lord Davos moved through the haze, one hand on the pommel of the knife he never drew. When he spotted her bent amid the ashes, shoes scorched, he quickened his stride. Wind tugged sparks from the debris like fireflies and flung them at his cloak. He felt each sting but did not slow. "My lady," he called over the crackling hush, "forgive me, but the king grows restless. The pyre's done. Storm's breaking. Come inside where the air is sound." Melisandre rose. Ash clung to her hem in gray frills. "Air cannot thrust daggers, Lord Davos. It merely feeds the flame or fails it. And the king, he dreams of daggers far heavier than wind." Davos halted a pace away, nostrils wrinkling at the burnt pitch stench. "Stannis means to sail as soon as the tide turns. South to Storm's End, then march for King's Landing. You lit the world tonight, and now he'll burn Shallether to see those visions rot. The tide will turn, but the sea obeys moons, not men. The king must obey the fire." Her red eyes gleamed. "He will not take King's Landing first. The flame names the wall. Lightbringer must know the cold before it can slay it." Davos wet his lips. "The wall is leagues beyond leagues. Winter closes the roads even for kings. And King's Landing sits ripe after the wildfire blasts. If his grace strikes now." She stepped closer, soft voice sliding between his doubts. "If he strikes south, the throne may fall into his hand, yet fall like a shard of glass, cutting him open, bleeding the realm. Azor Ahai cannot forge the sword in the heart of a city of lies. He must go north as the fires commanded." Davos felt ash swirl underfoot, felt sparks hiss on his cheeks. "Then tell him plain. But remember this." He touched the pouch at his belt, a child's carved stag inside, polished by worry. "Some prices no throne repays." Melisandre followed his glance. "Love is a forge hotter than any pyre. Pray the world has time to test its steel." They returned together through echoing corridors. In the war room, Stannis paced a figure 8 around the painted table, jaw clamped like a smith's vice. Maps lay scattered, arrows marking routes through the Stormlands, along the King's Road, over the Blackwater Rush. When the pair entered, he turned on heel. Candlelight kindled the restless anger in his eyes. "You kept me waiting," he rasped. "Waiting seasons hunger," she replied, "and hunger seasons resolve. I am resolved enough." Stannis slammed a mailed fist on Riverrun, cracking the lacquer. "Wildfire ignites in King's Landing, the lion cub quakes, my brother's bannermen squabble like gulls, yet you whisper north, always north." "The throne is bait," she said, gliding nearer. "The true battle is beyond castles. The night gathers. I have seen you on a field of snow, sword alight, foes of ice crumbling before you. Unless you stand there, the southern throne will mean nothing, ashes on a wind you cannot master." Stannis' shoulders drew taut. He looked to Davos. "You are quiet." Davos chose each word like a stone in a sling, heavy and dangerous to mishandle. "Your grace, if you ride north you forfeit ripe gains. Yet if the child's stories be half true, if dead men truly march, no gain southward matters. It falls to you to weigh clouded tales against the steel in your grasp. The king's gray beard quivered with curt exhale. He closed his eyes a span, fingers drumming the table's jagged coast. The wall then, but by ship, one fleet to Eastwatch, fewer leagues over water, and winter's roads cannot bar a sail. Relief did not soften his face. Nothing softened granite, but Davos glimpsed a fragile thing flicker in the king's stare. Fearful acceptance of a burden heavier than iron crowns. Melisandre bowed. I will prepare the fires for our voyage. Prepare them strong. Stannis turned away. The north has little use for warmth lately. Marked down. On the wall, Jon Snow dreamed of crypts beneath Winterfell. He walked torchless down a corridor where statues loomed cloaked in dust. Their stone swords crossed above him in silent warning. The tunnel slanted deeper, yet no chill touched him. Instead he sweated as though walking through dragon flame. At last he halted before an archway blocked by rubble. From beyond the stones issued a steady heartbeat. Slow, colossal, measured like drumbeats over ice. Each pulse puffed hot air through crevices, carrying the scent of burning pine. He shoved a stone and felt it wriggle under his palm like living meat. Blue light spilled through cracks. Shapes writhed beyond antlered shadows, winged shadows, claws scraping marble. Then a face slid between gaps, pale skin stretched tight, black eyes weeping soot. Melisandre's lips moved soundlessly on the other side of the rubble. Jon jerked awake, throat raw with cold air. Wind shrieked through arrow slits of his chamber. Ghost lay pressed against the doorway, ears flat, fangs bared at shadows. In the gray pre-dawn, the direwolf's red gaze darted toward the window slit. Jon followed it. Out over the forest, a crimson spark whipped low across the sky, leaving a smoky smear. A fiery bird. It vanished over the foothills. A knock rapped. Ed Tollett poked in, face paler than usual. Lord Commander, Raven from Eastwatch. Sightings of sails in the gullet. Black sails, they say, bearing the fiery heart. Jon rose, buckling his cloak. Stannis. So we guess. Eastwatch horns blew thrice at the sight. It swallowed. Black sails in winter rarely bring summer wine. Jon touched Ghost's flank. Send ravens to every tower. Increase the watches. Tell Bowen Marsh we muster supplies for men thrice our count. Stannis brings an army and hungry mouths. And banners, Ed muttered. And prophecy. Prophecy doesn't salt cod. Jon took Longclaw from its hook. But cold winds don't heed hunger either. Mark down. Daenerys Targaryen stood barefoot on the deck of Windserpent, letting spray crust her ankles with salt. The fleet spread behind her over Summer Sea. 60 ships flying black masts marked by the three-headed dragon aflame. Drogon wheeled above the flagship sail, red membranes catching western light like stained glass. Regal and Viserion soared the horizon, silhouettes against clouds smoldering gold. Each beat of their wings set sailors murmuring prayers in tongues from Slaver's Bay to the Basilisk Isles. The ships were not enough, she knew, nor the dragons. Across the world rose foes of frost no fire had tested in living memory, while nearer shores bristled with spears sworn to a throne of swords. Yet the plume of a dragon's breath had always been greatest when paired with allies unseen. She fingered the chain about her neck, Valyrian links cool despite sun. At its end dangled the brass cylinder Tyrion had sent aboard a skiff 2 nights past, a cracked pipe of dark glass bound in leather thong. Inscribed on its lid in crabbed Valyrian script were 4 words for fire against ice. No explanation had accompanied the relic. Ser Barristan had argued leaving it sealed until they reached Westeros. Dario, ever fond of mischief, suggested plunging it overboard lest it contain plague. Daenerys chose trust. She had dreamed of Tyrion crossing burned lands while cold wind chased him. If he called this token their salvation, she would listen. Now at the rail, she slid the cord and eased the lid. A wisp of breath, colder than deep ocean, puffed forth. Within lay dust the color of pearl, shimmering faintly. She tapped a few grains into her palm. They melted, leaving tiny beads of water. Ice dust that thawed to pure liquid, the blood of some frozen giant? She turned to Melisandre. Send word to the alchemists. Test this dust with fire and flame. Track how it melts, how it freezes again. And guard the vial with your life. Melisandre took it gingerly. Yes, your grace. And Tyrion, he wrote again. She handed over a second roll, wax unbroken. Daenerys popped the seal. Tyrion's cramped hand scratched deep grooves. If this letter finds you before the frost burns holes through your sails, know I have held dragon's flesh in my hands, eggs black as void and heavier than sin. Valyria hides heat even where ice crawls. I will bear them to you or die thrice trying. Until then, guard the dust. It may snuff frost fire when none other can. As ever, I amuse myself imagining your face as you read. A queen's smirk beats a tankard of ale at day's end. T. Daenerys folded the note against the wind. Dragon eggs in Valyria, it sounded madder than a pale mare's fever dream. Yet eggs had hatched once at her touch. If more slept under glass ruins, she would waken them. She gazed northeast where sea met sky. Somewhere beyond that blue the wall towered and beneath it waited death. She lifted her arm, letting Drogon's shadow drape her. Fly, she whispered. The black dragon screamed, banking toward Westeros as if understanding. Markdown. Deep within the mazes of Bravos, Arya's stark-threaded alleys as narrow as Needle's eye chasing an echo. The city bustled with its usual cacophony, gulls, canal horns, water sellers crying rates, but above it she heard a different call, half memory, half lure, the faint crackle of flame on ice. The sound tugged her toward the harbor where a battered cog had been towed, holds stinking of snowbear pelts. Men offloading crates blinked at a small girl slipping among them. From a gap between barrels Arya glimpsed a parcel of pale bark sealed in wax. The symbols smeared across it matched nothing she'd seen, but the wax wore a sigil, a heart ablaze. She waited until the deck boss's attention swiveled, then darted past, blade drawn to flick the cord. The parcel tore open. Inside were scrolls, brittle and frost-rimmed, titles in languages older than Old Tongue. She slid one free, servants' recipes for preserving fire within iron. Another held directions for forging glass swords quenched in dragon flame. She inhaled, lungs filling with the scent of smoke, though no forge smoked nearby. Girl, a sailor barked, lunging to seize her shoulder. She twisted, heel jabbing his instep, darted into a warren of rope coils. Stir roared behind her, but by the time arms reached the stack she was gone, scroll tucked beneath tunic. Hours later she unfurled it in the cluttered attic where she slept. Candlelight revealed diagrams of a blade shaped like a wave, glowing runes etched down its spine. Beside it a sigil of the fiery heart. She did not need Melisandre's ruby eyes to read the margins, steel for wolves who walk in shadows. Bring this to the flame and the dark will flee. Arya rolled the parchment tight and tied it with catgut. Tomorrow she booked passage west, coin or no. She had faces enough to pay any toll. Markdown. In Old Town's lantern-lit vault, Samwell Tarly bent over a slab of greenish glass. Marwyn the mage muttered incantations under breath that smelled of sour wine. The glass, salvaged from Valyrian ruins and rumored to be fused dragon flame, lay atop a copper brazier shrouded in powdered obsidian. Sam read aloud verses traced on papyrus. Charms bridging fire into ice, commands to still a heart already dead. Each syllable shivered the air. Marwyn struck flint. Flame caught the obsidian dust and burned green. It licked the glass slab. At first it seemed ordinary fire, but as it crawled the surface the glass brightened until shapes swam inside. Silhouettes of armies, sigils new and ancient. A wolf's head, a crowned stag, a three-eyed crow perched upon a skeletal weirwood. Sam swallowed. You see it too. Aye. Marwyn leaned close, spectacles ablaze. Magic's marrow. These visages tie to blood still coursing in mortal veins. We must carry this seeing to the wall. The night's watch stands blind else. A creak at the stair froze them. Gilly entered, babe in arms. Sam, she breathed. A maester from the citadel below, weeping that ravens fly with tidings of plague, a winter fever in the reach. They searched the library for cures. Her voice quavered at the wild green fire. Should I fetch water? Sam snuffed the flame with a pot lid. Darkness slammed back. The glass cooled, but the last vision lingered just long enough for him to glimpse Melisandre's ruby shimmer again and a child's face wreathed in flame, Shireen's cracked with grayscale scars. Sam stumbled, pressing palm to the slab as if to smother the prophecy. The glass felt ice-cold now. He looked to Marwyn. If winter ravages the south, we travel north into greater peril. Yet the wall cannot stand alone. Marwyn grinned, teeth green in leftover glow. Knowledge seldom sits where it's safe. Pack your scrolls, Slayer. The ship leaves at dawn, plague or no. Markdown. Tyrion Lannister and Jorah Mormont camped beneath a shattered arch inside Valyria's dead city, huddled around a blue-tinged flame that refused ordinary heat. Jorah's cloak steamed in thick unreal mist. Tyrion sucked wine from a skin, hoping the burn masked the cold radiating from their dragon egg bundle. 3 eggs, each the size of a mastiff's head, rested in a nest of sable ash. Lines of pale frost crawled veins over their onyx shells, yet when Tyrion laid his palm against one, warmth pulsed like a child's heartbeat. "You're certain?" Jorah asked, voice gone hoarse by sulfur choking the air. "As certain as a dwarf guessing in the dark can be." Tyrion breathed slow. "The tales say dragon eggs turn stone over centuries. These remain flesh. They sing, I swear, though my ears ring after a day in this ruin." "Then let's leave," Jorah muttered, glancing at looming silhouettes of half-melted gargoyles. "This ground groans at night, and the frost that clings to everything unnatural. Rumors speak of a doom still breathing here." Tyrion nodded. "The doom may well be waking, but it's not ours alone anymore. We've gifts for the Dragon Queen, and perhaps for the long night. Come morning, we head east to Volantis, book swift passage to Meereen." Jorah rose to stretch aching muscles. Mist swirled round his boots. "Suppose the Queen already sails north? We may chase her phantom across seas." Tyrion corked the skin. "Then we chase. A dwarf running behind a dragon is still faster than an army lost in snow." In the silence that followed, drift cracks sounded, ice shearing from broken pillars. A faint shape moved beyond their fire's azure smoke. A man form molded of hoarfrost, skin sparkling. It raised a hand palm out. Pure chill poured forth, dousing their flame. Darkness swallowed them. Jorah cursed, steel sliding free. Tyrion shoved egg bundle deeper into ash even as frost rimed his beard. The figure advanced, glimmering like moonlit glacier. In its empty eye sockets whirled blue motes. Instinct overcame dread. Tyrion snatched a dagger heated hours by the blue fire. His hilt scalded his grip. He flung it. The blade struck the frostman's chest and dissolved, metal hissing away. But the contact birthed steam clouds dizzying in heat. The frost cracked down its torso. Jorah charged, swinging Valyrian steel bartered in Slaver's Bay. Longclaw's twin etched with bare runes. Glass and ice screamed as blade met entity. The creature burst into shards that thunked against black stone. Tyrion's breath fogged, heart hammering. The shards melted, seeping into fissures. Jorah planted sword tip, chest heaving. White shadows in Valyria. No place is safe. Not even memory, Tyrion said. He nudged remains with boot. But flame still defeats frost. That is something. And Valyrian steel, Jorah added, eyeing his sword. They rekindled blue flame, stacking broken furniture. All night they kept watch as dry cracking echoed beyond arched mosaics, more frost wraiths waking, perhaps, but none dared nearer the dragon heat. Markdown. Nightfell over Winterfell lay quiet under smothering cloud. Bran Stark, Lord of Broken Tower, drifted in the dream grove behind his eyes. He soared as a weirwood raven over endless snowfield, beak crimson where sap dripped onto his feathers. 3 eyes opened, but one burned brightest, flaring green with ancient wisdom. The raven spiraled down into a chasm between worlds, roots of the great weirwood network twisting like veins of a god. Through those root veins Bran spied shapes scuttling, white spiders big as dogs carrying shards of dusk, crimson moths leaving sparks that set the roots aflame only to watch them heal. In the root heart he met another presence, immense and cold, wearing a face of chiseled ice. The Night King stood at an altar of blue crystal. With each breath he exhaled cracked whispers across the network, Stormbreak. Stormbreak. Bran felt the word reverberate across all livingwood. Branches above ground trembled. In their distant chambers, children of the forest stirred from sleep, eyes wide as moon. They felt it too, Stormbreak, the event when the wall's magic would sound like a horn and freeze then shatter. Bran flapped wings, tried to scream, but the raven's call lodged in throat. Below, the Night King turned his gaze upward, noticing Bran for first time. Blue light pierced through root lacquer, locking onto the raven. Bran's vision imploded into winter. He bolted awake in his solar, sweating despite hearth coals. Hodder dozed by the fire. Mira Reed knelt sharpening arrowheads. Bran's voice broke as he spoke the name, Stormbreak. Mira's knife stilled. What? The wall. Bran's pupils dilated until almost black. The Night King's power is board wide across the weirwoods. He plans a breaking Stormbreak. We must warn Jon, the Watch, anyone. Mira rose, eyes like flint. Ravens ride swifter than wind. We'll send every bird Winterfell owns. No, Bran swung his legs. Messages risk interception. The Night King watches routes no less than crows. I must reach John myself. He closed eyes, searching new connection. Direwolf bonds across distance. He found Ghost swift as heartbeat. Through Direwolf eyes he saw the walls stone edge and John striding beneath ramparts. Bran whispered through Warg Link, "Stormbreak, brother. Stormbreak soon." Ghost raised his muzzle, howling so sudden John stopped. The note carried across the yard, waking garrisons. John felt words inside the howl like nails on bone. He murmured, "Bran. Markdown. At Eastwatch by the sea, waves pummeled breakwaters. Stannis Baratheon's fleet rode heavy at anchor, masts groaning in gale. Men filed across plank bridges onto the frozen wharf. Stannis disembarked first, boots crunching rhyme. His gaze swept the walls' looming mass, lit here and there by foxfire dancing its courts. Cotter Pike, commander of Eastwatch, bowed stiffly. "Your Grace, welcome to our humble holding of rot and gull droppings. Arrivals unexpected, except ravens said you were sailing the King's Road last we knew. Ravens know what they're told." Stannis surveyed the watchers milling behind Pike. Ragged black cloaks, threadbare but eyes as bright as his knights. "I bring men, stores, smiths. The wall must stand." Pike's brows arched. "Speeches first? Walk this way, you'll find warmth." Melisandre descended gangway, red cloak trailing flame designs on snow. Men muttered but parted. She sensed at once the presence of another power, ancient, subtle, opposite her own. Cold writhed up the stones like unseen ivy. She felt watchers on the heights of Frost Fangs, felt Bran's dream cry, felt Night King's silent drum. Her ruby glowed. Inside the fort's main hall, Jon Snow approached, Longclaw sheathed in Direwolf scabbard. His regard with Stannis held calm steel. They clasped forearms, commander to king, the one outranked the other in law. Stannis wasted courtesy. "We sail to destroy what rises north. My men follow me beyond the wall come dawn." Jon nodded once. "We ride with you. But news reached me an hour past, a warning, Stormbreak. Bran says the enemy prepares to shatter the wall's spell. We must reinforce while time remains." Stannis frowned. "Stormbreak." Melisandre stepped forward. "A design older than the wall's founding. The dead need no gates breached if they can unmake the spell. It is why Lightbringer must be tempered here." She unfolded parchment bristling with sigils. "Tonight, before the storm, we forged the sword." Jon's eyes flicked to Shireen passing behind her father. The girl smiled shyly, cheeks pinched by cold. Jon felt a spike of dread. He had heard rumor of the tale, a lover sacrificed to fire to wake Lightbringer. His glance met Davos's, fear mirrored there. Stannis followed Melisandre's voice like a blade drawn to whetstone. "Explain. 3 attempts needed. Twice the blade will crack quenched in lion and wolf. The third, only a king's blood of royal line pure can fuse steel to flame. Not just any, your daughters. Baratheon's line runs Orys back to Aegon's sister. Dragon's blood mingles with stag. Shireen is key." Stannis's face drained color. "She is my heir." Melisandre did not blink. "And the realm's hope." Davos slammed fist on table. "No, milady. Burn a girl and you lose the realm even if you win a throne." Stannis's glare silenced him. "Enough. We weigh duty against love." He turned to Jon. "How many men hold the wall?" 600 at Castle Black, 3 at Eastwatch, 2 at Shadow Tower, Jon said, voice clipped. Rangers lost count of dead beyond. Even giants stir again. Stannis looked to Shireen, who traced a finger over grain of oak bench. She sensed the tension, small shoulders stiff. "Father," she whispered. The king's jaw clenched so tight a tendon quivered. "Go to your chambers, sweetling." She obeyed. When her steps faded, Stannis sagged against map table. "Prophecy. Duty. Gods stripe our hearts until nothing left but scars." He faced Melisandre. "No fire touches my child. Find another way." Melisandre lowered eyes. "As you command, your grace." But when she lifted them again, the ruby at her throat flared, and Jon swore he saw shapes flicker in its depth. Shadowy hands around a hilt of fire. Marked down. South in King's Landing, wildfire explosions had carved a quarter-mile scar through slum, and September ash drifted over city like gray snow, coating citrus stalls, red brick parapets, shrouding the Iron Throne's spires so they seemed carved of bone. Cersei Lannister stalked crimson carpet corridor lined by burned sconces. Trails of soot stained her white gown. She burst into the small council chamber, pushing past council's men reeling from smoke. Jaime awaited, gold hand folded across wrist. "There are rumors of a flaming sword over Dragonstone," he said without preamble. and of white shadows raiding northern keeps. We have lost fleets to storm. The realm fractures. Cersei scoffed. Fables. The only shadows that concern us are Tyrell plots, and Targaryen dragons crossing narrow sea. Let the snow be wraith-haunted. We hold crowns. Jaime studied her, eyes sorrowful. Crowns melt when heat rises from both sides, wildfire below, dragonfire above. I rode north once to treat with the Starks. Perhaps we ride again, not as foes but She whirled. We do not beg Starks. We break them. A door opened. Qyburn stepped in draped like a vulture. Your Grace, my little birds report Dragon Queen's fleet leaves Meereen. 3 dragons full-grown. And this. He produced a shard of black glass rimed in frost. Courier found dead on Rosby Road. Inside his satchel, the stone and a note bearing the fiery heart. It freezes flesh to touch. Cersei eyed the shard. Magic stones? Let the red priests play at sorcery. Qyburn's thin smile flickered. Magic slaughters wise men who ignore it. Permit me study. We might brew weaponry of our own. She nodded curtly. Do so, and strengthen ballista lines. Cersei took vineyard wine from a chalice. As she drank, Jaime gazed at the frozen shard, thinking of wildfire's green heat and of a prophecy whispered by a witch long gone. When tears drown you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands about your pale throat. He touched his golden replacement hand. Fate had many ironies. Markdown. Northwest of Last Hearth, the Night King's army met first resistance on a rise called Widow's Crown. Torches flickered in palisade gaps where Umbers and Karstarks fought side by side once more, old feuds frozen beneath a greater threat. Lyanna Mormont commanded from atop a ruined tower, voice ringing bigger than her small frame. She loosed arrow after arrow of obsidian-tipped shafts at shambling corpses. Each shaft burst into azure flames where it struck undead flesh, slaying again. The men cheered the child lady until shadows loomed. Giants wights marched forward, wielding tree-trunk clubs thick with rime. The wooden palisade crumbled like straw. Lyanna shouted withdrawal, her banner of bear and tree receding toward fallback trenches seeded with dragoglass caltrops. But a giant's club smashed near, hurling her onto gravel. Dazed, she watched the moon slide behind cloud, leaving only the eye-blue glow of the dead. A horn blast rose behind. A wedge of silhouettes charged down Widow's Ridge, riders cloaked in crimson and black. At their head galloped a woman with hair like living embers, sword in hand burning orange. Behind her thundered a fire-breathing horse, mane ablaze. The riders crashed into flanks of wights, flaming lances skewering them. Fires danced across the mass, opening a corridor for survivors. Lyanna staggered upright. The red-haired rider dismounted, carving a path toward her. She recognized the woman's snowfox sigil, a bastard branch of House Cairn from far south. Who? Lyanna rasped. Lady Valina Cairn, the rider replied. Smoke curled from padding beneath her gorget, but her eyes were bright. I ride with the Lord of Light's host. Come, we ferry you to refuge. Refuge? Lyanna spat blood. This is my land. Then hold it. But you must meet our general first. A sword forged of flame comes north soon. Your words could sway him to station armies here. Lyanna wiped blade on cloak. I'll speak iron to any sword. Lead. They mounted. As they rode, Lyanna glimpsed Night King far across the plain, riding a dead elk crowned in frost. His gaze locked to the flaming lances, and she felt a chill spear her marrow. Yet in that same instant, warmth stirred, the fire hostess's sword glowed hotter, answering the cold glare as sunrise answers night. Markdown. Back at Eastwatch, Jon Snow climbed the Chair of the Winds, a spire jutting above the wall's height, to watch dawn bloom. Frost rimed his beard, but he hardly felt it. Melisandre's ritual to forge Lightbringer had been delayed by Stannis' refusal. Yet melting red had dripped from the ruby all night, pooling like liquid sapphire at her throat until Jon feared it might crawl off her skin. He had left the hall restless, seeking counsel from emptiness of sky. Now as first light bled amber across ocean, he spotted sails hurrying toward harbor, dark hulls but masts bleached bone white. Cannibal sons, the brigands of Skagos, answered to no king. Jon signaled horns. Eastwatch surged. Ships dropped anchor a bowshot out. A single skiff rode forth, banner of gray dire wolf stitched on ragcloth. Jon squinted. On the prow stood a tall woman in wolf cloak. He recognized her stride even after years Arya's. He raced down icy stair, reaching wharf as she leapt onto planks. They met wordless, arms crushing one another. Ghost sniffed her boots, tail whipping. Tears glazed Jon's lashes. Arya pulled back, face lean, eyes as sharp as knives. I have something, she whispered, untying pack. She produced the Bravosi scroll and a second item. A dagger of pale glass swirled with coal veins. Steel and flame both. He stared. Valyrian glass? Not exactly. Fire-quenched dragon-forged steel infused with obsidian dust. The scroll holds its making. They want it joined with Lightbringer when the time comes. Jon cradled the blade. It drank light. We bring it to Stannis and Melisandre. Careful she doesn't feed your heart to it, Arya muttered. Jon laughed hollowly. The thought had crossed. Together they strode for the gate, siblings in name and now in fate. Behind them, Skagosi rowers unloaded crates of dragon glass shards the size of goat skulls, tribute to the northern blood they respected. At last, Jon thought the wall had teeth. Markdown. The moon rose blood-bright over Valyrian Strait as Tyrion and Yora guided their sloop into calm water. Their hold groaned under weight of 3 eggs cushioned in straw. Tyrion sat at stern, quill scratching letters by lantern's tremor. Daenerys, I bring fire. And news. Frost spirits haunt Valyria itself. If Doom's ghost nurses the enemy's child, we must birth hotter dragons. Prepare. Tea. He sealed the parchment in flask for Raven. As he did, one of the eggs pulsed so fierce it rattled plank boards. You're a steady crate. A hairline crack slithered across shell, releasing a hiss of steam scented of brimstone and something sweeter, like lilac in bloom. Mother above, Yora muttered. Or below, Tyrion corrected. Eggs hatch in fire, yet frost clings here. Perhaps these hatch in cold. A second crack birthed a flicker of red light inside shell. Tyrion's eyes widened. Not now. Wait for Queen's warmth, you rebellious rock. A jolt struck hull. Sea bubbled with white foam. Something enormous turned beneath keel. The egg rocked harder. Yora raised sword, but water settled. Silence reigned. After a tense beat, Tyrion exhaled. The crack-sealed shell flexed back whole. He could have sworn Egg laughed. Let us row faster, he suggested. Yora agreed. Markdown. In Rhoynar ruins near the Sorrows, Brienne of Tarth pursued a rumor of Sansa Stark. She waded chest-deep through mist that glowed moss-green with corpse fire. Podrick Payne trailed clutching steel like sacrament. They knew knights lost here turned wild, but Prophecies' whispers guided Brienne's stride. A red priest named Thuras had foretold Forge of Dawn forging swords for maidens of winter. Brienne must bring winter's maiden to the wall. A torch flared ahead. Brienne signaled quiet. She glimpsed 3 figures around campfire. One tall, cloaked in hound helm, one frayed cloak of rose dust, the third flame-haired, slender. Sansa. Relief cracked Brienne's composure. She stepped into firelight. Lady Sansa. The hound surged, sword half-drawn. Sansa gasped, but her posture remained regal. Sir Brienne. We ride north. She explained briskly. Word of dead men crossing Last River reached them. Sandor Clegane escorted her north to pay debts. Brienne nodded, tears glinting. Then I escort you. The hound grunted. World's ending, still knight's oaths. But he accepted. Podrick fetched horses. They set out at dawn. Somewhere beyond mists, the sunrise crowned Sansa's hair like molten copper. Brienne felt flames stir within her own heart, a forge. She whispered a silent prayer that steel and snow would fuse without bloodshed. Markdown. Night after night, Melisandre watched Stannis struggle between paternal love and prophetic duty. She counseled him gently, robes whispering sweet dread. But loyalty to the Lord of Light did not blind her to mortal heartbreak. She had once been sold as slave child to temple. Flames. She remembered fear. One dusk she entered Shireen's chamber alone. The girl looked up from a wooden stag she painted gold. Lady Melisandre, she greeted, voice soft but brave. You fear me, Melisandre said. Shireen's eyes flicked to the ruby. I fear what fire does to wood and people. Melisandre knelt, crimson silk pooling like blood. Fire is a door. Some pass through to darkness, some to light. She took Shireen's grayscale-scarred hand, felt its fragile warmth. Perhaps there is path where you walk in flame yet do not burn. Shireen frowned, thoughtful. Like dragons. Exactly. Melisandre's tone softened. Would you help me test a charm? The princess hesitated but nodded. Melisandre produced a vial of clear oil. She daubed a drop on Shireen's wrist, murmuring Valyrian verse. The oil soaked and shimmered. Then Melisandre struck flint. A tiny flame danced across her fingertips. She pressed it to the oil. Fire licked Shireen's skin, but the child felt no pain. Only warmth like bathwater. Her eyes widened with wonder. See? Melisandre smiled. The Lord can wrap you in fire without harm." Shireen laughed, delighted. A tear traced her cheek. Melisandre extinguished flame. Inside she pondered, if the charm held, perhaps Lightbringer could be forged without death. Sacrifice need not mean ending. She rose, renewed purpose burning brighter than ruby. Markdown. Beyond the shivering sea, Euron Greyjoy's silence sailed waters unmarred by chart. His priests wailed beneath deck lamps carved of human skull. Euron leaned on rails staring at cloud wall swirling violet. Dreams of dragon horns and ice whites gnawed him. He had heard of Night Kings coming and saw opportunity, steal his storm, ride chaos to a throne. From hold he dragged a great horn banded in Valyrian glyphs taller than a man. When blown, it could bind dragons, so legend said. But his priest spoke of second purpose, a note strong enough to weaken any wall. Euron caressed glyphs. He would sound it at Stormbreak, toppling the world's tower. His grin cracked wide as night. Markdown. Full moon marked 1 week since Stannis' fleet landed. Within Blacksmith Yard below Eastwatch, sparks flurried night and day. Jon Snow oversaw forging of arrowheads from Skagosi dragonglass. Arya ducked between anvils, instructing smiths on Braavosi folding technique gleaned from scroll. Maester Aemon sat bundled in furs, advising on heat differential despite blind eyes. On ninth bell, Melisandre appeared bearing blank steel sword freshly forged, length of her arm, fuller etched with storm sigils. She requested Jon, Davos, and Stannis meet at Ice Tunnel before the gate. There she plunged sword in brazier until metal glowed white. She spoke, first quench of Lightbringer, heart of a lion. Not literal lion, the lion stands for courage offered freely. Lord Davos. Davos stepped, chest tight. She handed hilt. Dip blade through your palm, she directed. He hesitated, then drew a deep breath. He clutched steel. Instantly heat seared him, skin blistering, but he drove blade into his own flesh until blood hissed on steel. He released with cry. Melisandre caught sword. Metal gleamed red, then cracked down spine. The first attempt failed. Davos's hand blistered but alive. Melisandre muttered thanks. Second quench, wolf's calm. She faced Jon. His eyes hardened. He slit forearm and pressed cut to blade. Frost steamed warm. Sword vibrated, fractures healing, but then it snapped clean at tip. Failure again. Jon clutched wound. Melisandre whispered apology. She swung to Stannis, eyes luminous. Third quench, his king's blood wedded to dragons. But not death. Fire's blessing weaved about your child can temper blade without ending her. We must cast sword through both your pulses entwined. Stannis summoned Shireen. The girl came unafraid, wrist still bearing oil charm. Melisandre dabbed blade in basilisk fire so faint it shimmered violet. She sliced Stannis' palm lightly, then Shireen's wrist along oil-coated skin. Blood drops mixed on blade, but instead of sizzling, they sparked tiny tongues of light racing along edge. The cracks fused, tip regrew in shimmer. The sword blazed as if forged of molten dawn. No scream left Shireen's lips, she felt only warmth. Light spread, bathing tunnel in day-bright radiance. Men shielded eyes. A horn deep within wall responded, groaning thunder. Ice overhead crackled, but did not break. The sword sang, a high note like chimes. Melisandre lifted it high. Behold Lightbringer reborn. Fire to answer ice. Cheers erupted. Shireen grinned unharmed. Davos wept. Jon felt warmth wash wound closing swift. Yet far north, the Night King felt blades birth like splinter through his skull. He howled and every dead thing echoed. Stormbreak had begun. Markdown. Wind screamed at night. Clouds thrashed, spitting frost daggers. Ed Tollett leaned on parapet muttering that if this was dawn of salvation he'd rather oversleep. Jon inspected arrow stores. Arya sharpened glass dagger until it leapt sparks of violet. Stannis stood upon the eastern rampart, Lightbringer in gauntlet. The blade shed constant golden glow, melting snow beneath his boots. Melisandre's face reflected its fire as she whispered invocations. Suddenly horns blasted. 1, 2, 3, then 4, 5. Unprecedented. Jon raced to the railing. In the ghostly aurora below, he saw them, a wall of the dead stretching from coast to highland, torches of icy blue beyond count. At their center, atop undead elk, the Night King pointed a sword of black ice directly at Stannis. Melisandre shouted words lost in wind. Lightbringer flared brighter, projecting heat wave. Frost along wall's base turned to mist. The dead advanced. Catapults hurled jars of lamp oil lit by flaming arrows. Explosions blossomed but scythed only front ranks. Dead climbed over charred limbs unfazed. Giants slammed against gates with groaning. Arya loosed arrows, dropping whites with obsidian heads. Jon led archers with dragonglass. Yet surge continued. On east flank, ice spiders scaled vertical ice, legs boring holes. Rangers hacked but lost footing. Amid chaos, a distant mournful horn sounded, deep, inhuman, echoing between glaciers. Jon's blood iced. The horn of Joramun, he whispered. Cracks spidered along Wall's face. Lightbringer pulsed. Melisandre's voice rose to shriek. She urged Stannis, strike the wall itself, release fire into ice foundation. Stannis hesitated. Jon yelled, do it. He plunged sword tip into ice parapet. Light streaked into fissures, coursing downward. The wall glowed red like forge. Cracks sealed, then expelled violescent flames through arrow slits, lashing at whites. Below, the Night King raised both arms. A blizzard wall rose, smothering flame, pushing icy shockwave upward. The parapet froze anew. Lightbringer dimmed. Jon hastened to Stannis' side, clutched hilt with his blood-wounded forearm. The blade flared again, combined. Two flames, king and wolf, kindled stronger. Blue hail hammered their faces. Jon roared, overwined. You are Azor Ahai, but a sword needs two hands, one of ice and one of fire. Together. Stannis met his eyes, nod. They braced side by side, blade held by both. Melisandre pressed her palms to their backs, channeling heat into steel. The sword erupted in white fire. A beam shot from parapet, lancing through blizzard, striking Night King's elk, ripping beast apart. Night King toppled but rolled fluidly, rising unscathed. He screamed a note like cracking lakes. Dead surged. Within the wall's heart, ancient spells groaned. Magic older than kingdoms grappled frost intrusion. Resulting shockwave shattered ramparts for leagues, hurling men and whites alike. Yet the wall held, though waist-deep fissures steamed. When dusk cleared, armies paused. Dawn touched horizon, trembling. Lightbringer continued glowing, but softer, a sunrise at rest. Jon helped Stannis defeat. Not victory, he rasped, but respite. Stannis nodded. Night falls again tonight. Melisandre's eyes bled tears of joy. And then Lightbringer shall burn brighter still, for fire has tasted ice and lives. They withdrew to tend wounds, reforged alliances. War was far from done. But prophecy, at last, stood embodied in sword and souls, tested against storm and unbroken. Somewhere in dimming gloom, the Night King prepared next assault. Euron Greyjoy lifted Dragonhorn to lips, Daenerys' fleet neared Blackwater, and Tyrion carried eggs warm with hidden life. Webs tightened. The song of ice and fire gathered breath for its crescendo. And the world held a heartbeat to listen. A hush lay over Eastwatch in the hour before the next nightfall, the silence of a garrison holding its breath while snowflakes spiraled like drifting embers. It was the hush before smiths rang hammers, before maesters sharpened quills, before ravens beat wings into darkening skies. In that fragile hush, Jon Snow stood atop the cracked parapet beside Stannis, studying the vast white plain now littered with frozen corpses. Some shattered, some smoking faintly where the earlier fires had died. Across the no-man's land, the enemy's horde waited motionless, serried ranks vanishing into blue-lit haze. They had withdrawn but not retreated. The Night King's will was as patient as ages of ice. Lightbringer rested point down between them. Buried to the crossguard in a block of ice Jon's men had carved to fit the blade. The sword simmered amber, the glow pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Stannis' gauntlet fist clenched the hilt. Jon's scarred hand braced the pommel. They shared the weapon's warmth in silence, neither wishing to release it first. Somewhere deep in Jon's mind echoed the words the old bear had once spoken, "The wall is a sword." And he wondered if this was what Jeor Mormont had foreseen, a single blade that must never leave the wall until the long night was done. Boots crunched behind them. Arya emerged, wool cloak whipped by the wind. Her eyes flicked from Stannis to Jon. "They're moving," she said, more a warning than a report. At her signal, a black-fletched arrow soared from a ranger on an ice shelf and arced into the desolate field. The arrow burst in a hiss of ghostlight as it struck, briefly illuminating the creeping enemy line. Pale giants shifted, bone wyverns unfurled skeletal wings, and a new shape slouched forward, a massive warcar surrounded by horns of frozen mammoth tusks. On its dais stood the Night King, a frozen crown fused to his skull, right arm extended like an accusing spear toward the wall's heart. Jon felt the message in his bones. Stormbreak is not finished. Archers, he called, and a chorus of horns sent quarrels streaking. Obsidian shafts shattered against invisible wards before reaching the warcar, their splinters fizzling in frost. The Night King remained still, disdainful. Below, in Eastwatch's yard, Melisandre guided a circle of torches around a half-completed trench where barrels of pitch and lamp oil had been interred beneath boards of seasoned timber. 24 Black Brothers and Sellswords lowered blocks of dragonglass into slots between the barrels. The Red Woman's chant threaded between gusts, her words binding flame to stone. Davos slipped beside her, hand bandaged, face gray with fatigue. "It won't be enough," he muttered. "It buys an hour," she replied without pausing the chant. "An hour's breath may birth victory." "Aye." Davos drew the cloak tighter. "But only if we hold the gate. If the wall truly breaks tonight." She finished the prayer, exhaled fog. "If it breaks tonight, Lord Davos, we are already dead. The gate is now the least of our concerns." She turned fiery eyes on him. "You wonder why your hand still aches? Because light met darkness inside that blade. A shard of the wall's ancient magic seeped into your blood. Beware frost in your bones. Yet that very frost may temper your courage." Davos blinked, unsettled. He flexed his injured fingers inside the glove and indeed felt a prickle of cold radiating inward from the scar, like a fragment of winter lodged permanently beneath the skin. A horn blast boomed overhead. The Night King's host had begun a slow advance. Melisandre strode for the inner stairs, her crimson cloak streaming like a wound. On the sea beyond Eastwatch, warships pitched at anchor, masts clacking. In Stannis' flagship Fury, Shireen Baratheon sat on a stool in the captain's cabin with Maester Pylus carefully rewrapping her wrist in fresh linen soaked in honey water. The skin was pink but unbroken, the oil charm having spared her any burn. Outside, snow rattled the hull. She traced Lightbringer's rune sketches on a parchment, fingers trembling. Pylus finished binding. "Your Grace, you should rest. The Queen would worry. Mother is safe on Dragonstone," Shireen said, voice small. "I asked Father to let her stay." She tucked the parchment away. "And the realm worries more than Mother. We are all pages in a book only the Lord of Light can read." Pylus blinked. "Wise words." He bowed, leaving the girl alone with her candle. Shireen brought out another scrap, a page torn from Legend of Azor Ahai, where the forging was described, once with lion's heart, once with wolf, third with beloved's blood. She read it for perhaps the 100th time, yet tonight she noticed a line she'd always skimmed, and the blade burned white when day bested night for the first time. Lightbringer glowed amber now, not white. "White flame," she whispered to herself. "That means there may be one more test." She shivered, blew out the candle, and listened to the hull creak. Snow-lashed Dragonstone's courtyard, where Ser Axel Florent directed a line of lords and retainers gathered under flickering torches. The wind from Blackwater Bay carried charred smell of the wildfire explosions still haunting King's Landing. Florent's men loaded wagons with grain, salted cod, and barrels of pickled beets for the north, others hammered iron clamps over casks of pitch. Overhead, the stone drum's windows glowed with forging fires. Smiths labored to craft spare arrowheads in advance of Stannis' eventual siege of the capital. Inside the painted hall, Maester Cressen's successor, young Maester Caron, delivered a letter to Queen Celis. Daenerys Targaryen crossed the narrow sea with 3 dragons. Her fleet expects landfall at Duskendale within days. Celis' lips tightened. She ordered courier ravens to White Harbor, urging the Manderleys to hold fast and refuse Targaryen landing rights. Yet 500 leagues away on a wind-scored beach near Dun Fort, a fishing girl named Mara watched first glow of dragonfire flare over the horizon as Drogon's silhouette blotted stars. The dragons had arrived and couriers were already too late. Tyrion Lannister's sloop, Kingfisher, labored in heavy chop south of the Vale. A freezing gale snapped its square sail to tatters, forcing crew to lower canvas and ride bare-masted on currents. Tyrion crouched beside the crate holding the 3 eggs. Thin cracks webbed all 3 now, faint light flimmered through them, red, green, and gold, each blinking with separate heartbeat. He fancied he could hear them keening like distant violins. Jorah Mormont staggered into the hold and knelt. "We've lost the rudder. The captain says we'll ground on Breakstone Shoals by dawn unless the wind veers. Then we pray to every god but the drowned one," Tyrion said. He grasped Jorah's arm. "If we wreck, these eggs must survive. Can you swim that far?" "Through breakers? With a crate? Doubtful. Then we find a way to fly." Tyrion smirked, but his eyes were bleak. He lifted the black and scarlet egg. Its shell heated his palms like kettle iron. He felt the creature inside twitch. "Perhaps the eggs will hatch tonight, right when we need wings." Jorah's brows nodded. "Without a funeral pyre?" Tyrion shrugged. "Old Valyria was a forge without equal, yet I've just sailed through ice wraiths there. Nothing is as it was." He regarded the ember cracks. If dragon breath cannot reach Eastwatch in time, at least the memory of dragons will. Night fell fully over the wall. The plain before Eastwatch was now a frozen hell's cape of advancing dead. They marched in silence, only the crunch of ice under bone echoing faintly. Obsidian arrows slowed them, pitch-filled trenches burst in towers of flame, scorpion bolts laced with iron-fused dragonglass skewered giants. But still they came, rising again unless their bodies were obliterated or their masters struck down. On the parapet, Arya loosed the last of her special glass steelheads, each arrow a spark that killed twice. She reached back for another, but her quiver was empty save for regular goose-feather shafts. She flung the bow down, drew her dragonglass dagger and needle, and turned to descend through a murder hole to the inner courtyard. Within that courtyard, hundreds of refugees huddled, wildlings who had crossed south under Jon's amnesty, Karstark prisoners marched here to avoid the enemy, and Umbers who had refused to bend knee to Ramsay months before. They cowered behind barricades of overturned wagons. Arya darted among them, urging them to gather rocks and dragonglass shards. "Every hand fights," she said. "Every heart beats until dawn." Her words spread. A white-bearded free-folk chieftain named Styrn One Ear hoisted a broken staff capped with jagged glass and bellowed a war cry. The barricade line erupted with answering shouts. Cracks thundered through the night. Jon looked west and saw a sheet of the wall a mile distant crumble outward in great slabs, snow pluming. The enemy had found a weak spot. Memory of the horn blast earlier had carved fractures deep inside. Scores of whites spilled through the breach like water. Riders galloped to intercept, but the breach widened. Jon clenched teeth. "I must go," he told Stannis. Stannis would not release the hilt. "Take the sword." Jon shook head. "Your destiny holds it. Mine is to block that gap." He hefted Longclaw. "Send what men you can spare. Hold the center." If they swarmed, the breach were flanked. Stannis grunted approval. Jon plunged down the steps, Ghost bounding ahead, snow fanning under his paws. Below, Ed Tollett already rallied 50 brothers, dragonglass spears in hand. Together they pounded across the inner ramp and out onto the coastal shelf toward the groaning fissure. Jon glimpsed the Night King's war car redirect toward the breach. If the commander stepped through, the Watch's flank would collapse. Jon's breath steamed as he sprinted, mind racing. No dwarven horn here to bring the wall crashing on both armies, yet maybe weight could. "Grapples," he shouted. Rangers carried coils of chain and hooks meant for lifting fallen masonry. Jon pointed to the largest ice shelf arching over the new gap. "Hook it. When our weight drags it down, the shelf will cave, burying the breach and anything beneath." Ed's eyes bulged, but he barked orders. Men scrambled, flinging hooks over protruding ridges while others hammered pitons into the main buttress. Whites drew nearer, blue eyes ablaze. A giant corpse lumbered at their head. The chains groaned as men heaved. Ice cracked with rifle shot pops. The arch began to sag. Jon plunged his sword into a fissure, prying. He felt the ice's tension, like a bowstring wound to breaking. The giant reached them, swinging a tree trunk. It smashed two brothers flat. Ghost leapt, tearing at its throat, giving Joe and the heartbeat he needed. He shoved Longclaw deeper, the arch's keystone split. The entire shelf sheared away, roaring down an avalanche roar, burying the breach under thousands of tons of ice and stone. Jon tumbled back as shards exploded around him. Whites vanished beneath crushing white. Wind howled through the new landscape, and for a moment only drifting snow moved. He staggered upright. Ed clasped his shoulder, eyes wide with shock. The breach was sealed for now, but Jon saw the Night King still standing, his war car pivoting, expression unreadable. Then the Blue Monarch lifted his hand. Across the valley the ground trembled. The buried whites clawed free, climbing from shattered ice. Even the giant's sundered body knitted its limbs back. Jon's triumph died in his throat. Only fire ended these things. And they had little fire left. "Fall back," he rasped. He led the survivors toward the gate. Ghost limped, for streaked white with blood not his own. Back on the parapet, Lightbringer's glow flickered. Stannis slumped to one knee, drained. Melisandre appeared at his side and pressed both palms to the blade. The sword answered, brightening. In its glare she gazed across the gulf, searching. She sensed Tyrion's sloop battling surf far to the south, felt dragons in flight, felt Euron's horn keening over black waters, yet her heart anchored to one presence only, the Night King. She saw him lift both arms and conjure spear of solid midnight. Luminescent runes crawled its length. She whispered to Stannis, "He means to cast it at the sword. If he shatters Lightbringer, we lose the wall." Stannis rose. "Then we strike first." He lifted the sword in both hands, angled tip down across the battlement. Melisandre placed her ruby behind the crossguard, chanting. A lance of light surged from the blade, arcing across the valley in a torrent of molten dawn. For an instant night became day, snowfields flushing vermilion. The beams struck the Night King's war-car, shearing tusks like butter, vaporizing undead flesh in its path. The Night King himself raised the black spear as a shield. Light clashed ice with a thunderclap that shook teeth from skulls. The beam ricocheted skyward, cleaving a cloud open. Smoke cleared. The war-car's platform was cracked clean in half. The Night King knelt in the wreckage, crown askew, spear dim. He rose, ice flaking off his hide, glowing blue heart visible through fissure in his chest. He hurled the spear anyway. It streaked like a comet, trailing shards. Stannis braced, but Melisandre thrust her ruby before the blade. The gem burst. Red shards spun into the beam, redirecting its path so the spear slammed into the battlement 20 yards away, exploding ice into mist. Lightbringer's glow faltered to embers. The gem was gone. Melisandre collapsed. Stannis grabbed her with one arm. "Can you stand?" Her eyes wept blood. "The ruby was my well, but the sword is alive now. Hold fast." Arya reached the inner gate just as Jon's battered company returned. She spotted his limp and forced a grin. "Need a boot stitch?" He ruffled her hair with blood-soaked glove. "You did well." He pointed skyward. "Dawn's still hours off. They'll try again." She nodded, knuckles whitening around Needle's grip. Sudden horns blared from east. Riders approached along the shore road where surf crashed against broken icebergs. A standard snapped in the gale, a leaping silver trout on blue field. Riverrun men. And leading them a grisly woman in sallow hood, Lady Stoneheart astride a piebald horse, face pallid, neck scar livid purple. The Brotherhood without banners galloped behind her, flaming swords lighting the dusk. Jon's jaw dropped. Stoneheart raised a rope hand and rasped through torn voice, "Fire for the living." She tossed a cask. Rangers caught it, the cask glugged wildfire slurry. The Brotherhood dismounted, dragging barrels of the substance into the courtyard. "Beric Dondarrion, I blazing one last time," saluted Jon. "We followed the fire show upriver," he shouted. "Thought you could use a spark." Jon eyed the green barrels warily. Wildfire had once nearly destroyed King's Landing. Now perhaps it might save the wall. "Stack them by the inner tunnel," he ordered. "We'll flood the breach if they open it again." Beric ran to comply. Arya stared at Stoneheart, her mother's half-resurrected shade, and a lump of grief lodged in her throat. The older woman did not look her way, or perhaps could not bear to. The dead sometimes remembered too much. Far south, the first of Daenerys Targaryen's dragons crested Westeros's cliffs. Drogon banked over Storm's End ruins, his roar echoing into empty armories. Rhaegal and Viserion followed. Below them, scouts from House Estermont abandoned their posts, fleeing through rainy valleys. Daenerys, astride Drogon's neck, surveyed the dark expanse of the Stormlands, imagining how winter would bury orchards and vineyards. She scented smoke on the air not of her making. King's Landing burned still. Beside her in Half-Moon Wedge flew a vanguard of Dothraki blood riders mounted on wyvern-scaled saddles crafted in Meereen. The creatures hissed at cold air but pressed on. Below deck on the flagship Silver Wind, Missandei supervised the assembly of siege maps and scribes translating refugee reports from the Reach, fever epidemic, harvests failing, storms in the Red Mountains. Westeros bled. A sail appeared on the horizon from east, black canvas with kraken in golden thread. Euron's silence cut the swells on intercept course. Daenerys blinked. She had not meant to face the Ironborn yet. At ship's prow, Euron raised the dragon horn to his lips. 3 blasts rolled across the water like thunder. A shockwave rippled through the sky. Drogon screamed, wings buckling. Rhaegal and Viserion keened. The dragon spiraled, writhing. Daenerys clung to harness as Drogon shuddered. Then the horn cracked mid-note. Flames burst from its seams. Euron tossed it aside, cursing. The blast had hurt the dragons, but the horn's ancient spells unraveled in fire. They were free. Drogon steadied, turned, and released jet of black-red flame at silence. The ship heaved as its mast erupted. Ballistic bolts fired but missed. Daenerys drew a ragged breath. The horn had proven the danger of sorcery unknown to her. She could not risk more such weapons near the wall. She directed Drogon inland, leaving the Iron Fleet to her navy. Fire engulfed silence behind them, yet Euron leapt into sea laughing, a mad silhouette amid burning dragon's breath. His horn fragments sank, still glowing. On breakstone shoals, Tyrion's sloop foundered among rocks. Waves battered hull planks until they split. Yora heaved the crate onto a chunk of flotsam, binding it with rope. Frost-laden spray numbed their limbs. The dawn was moments away, but here dawn was gray. As they leapt into frigid surf, the first egg cracked fully, spilling a gush of scalding steam that turned water to roaring cloud. The shell fell away to reveal a hatchling jet black with faint crimson stripes. It screeched, wings beating, body no bigger than a hound but fire already glowing in its throat. "Ha!" Tyrion sputtered, coughing seawater. "Meet Aegon." He cradled the creature under an arm, ignoring burns. Yora lashed the crate to driftwood. A second egg burst, birthing an emerald hatchling with bronze eyes, Visenya. The third cracked reluctantly, revealing a pale gold dragon that squealed. They paddled onto a larger breaker rock. Above them narrow cliffs hugged the coast. Yora saw cave mouths dotting the stone. "Shelter there. When tide recedes, we march north with them." Tyrion coughed again. "We? You carry eggs. I shepherd dragons." The black hatchling clung to his hair, peeping. "Even better," Yora muttered. They stumbled into a sea cave, collapsing on damp sand. The hatchlings flapped around, warming air with tiny exhalations of flame. Tyrion laughed despite agony. 3 is good. 3 is a number for heroes or fools. Or for prophecies, Yora added. They rested. Back at Eastwatch, dawn light crept over the battlefield, tinting ice a dull rose. The Night King withdrew his forces a quarter-mile, regrouping. The wall groaned but stood. Stannis leaned on the parapet, Lightbringer dark but intact. Melisandre, supported by Davos, murmured that the sword needed feeding fire or blood, or it would gutter. Stannis glanced at his daughter's cabin lights flickering on the sea below. "No," Davos said, firm. Stannis closed his eyes. "I made vow. No sacrifice. Yet a king who cannot pay the price is no king. A king who murders his blood is worse than usurper." Davos's voice cracked. "Look to other fires. Wildfire, Dragonfire, scrolls from Valyria. There are alternatives." Melisandre admitted as much. "The fire bent tonight because 2 kings held the sword. Perhaps a third heart can renew it again, one not bound to either stag or wolf." Stannis frowned. "Whose heart?" "Dragons," she whispered. "Daenerys carries blood of flame and storm. If she comes north, if she wields Lightbringer beside you, perhaps the sword will blaze white." "And her dragons?" Stannis asked. "They will supply the fire the wall hungers for." Davos inhaled as realization dawned. "Then we must ally with the Dragon Queen." Stannis stared across the ice plain. "I will bend knee to no Targaryen. But if the wall falls, no throne remains to claim. Send ravens, Davos. Summon her parley here. The world is ending, let us end it on our terms." Across the narrow sea, Cersei Lannister paced in Maegor's holdfast, wildfire green illuminating her weary face. She clutched a sealed raven message. Daenerys landed with dragons. Euron's fleet aflame. She hurled the letter into a brazier. Jaime entered, sword girded. "I ride north. The wall holds by thread. If it breaks, every southern realm falls." She laughed. "You would abandon your queen for ghosts?" "For the living." He met her eyes. "For our child." She laid a hand on her stomach, but he pressed on. "If the dead reach here, no mother survives to birth." She turned away. "Go then. But don't expect welcome home." He brushed a kiss over her hair. "I don't." He strode out to join the column forming in the yard, the last loyal Lannister riders. As their banners exited the gate, a mournful toll sounded from the great September's ruins. A bell cracked but still loud. It tolled not for the dead but for the living who walked into death's arms. The dragons touched down at the ruins of Maidenpool, where Daenerys met with Lord Mutton, securing harbor for her fleet. She dispatched ravens offering Northern Alliance, her dragons to defend the wall in exchange for recognition of her claim. She did not know Stannis had spoken similar words hours earlier. In the hills beyond, Brienne's party approached. Sansa dismounted and gazed at the distant silhouettes, dragons. She felt dread and hope intermingled. Sandor spat fire lizards. "Thought I'd left the flames behind." Yet he followed her. Later that same night, as storm clouds gathered anew, Arya stood watch atop Eastwatch's highest pier. She balanced on the railing, gaze fixed south where the sea turned black. Lanterns bobbed in gloom, more ships, fisherfolk daring the winter seas. But she saw something else, a flicker of red farther out like an ember drifting. Then a roar split the sky. Drogon burst through clouds, wings spanning half the horizon, body lit by internal furnace. Behind him came Rhaegal and Viserion. Their shadows rippled over the wall like storm-cast banners. Arya's heart stuttered. Fires answered her call, she realized not Melisandre's alone. Gates rattled. Men shouted. Jon rushed up, eyes wide at the sight he once thought myth. Drogon circled, alighting on a promontory of ice half a league east where the wall curved inland. Snow boiled off his scales. Daenerys slid from his back, cloak whipping, boots crunching. Jon rode out with dozen black brothers and Stannis' envoy Davos. They halted before the Dragon Queen, the beast's molten eyes flickering. Jon dismounted, their gazes locked, ice in his and fire in hers, and in that second neither saw crown nor sword, only two burdens meeting. She spoke first. "I am Daenerys Stormborn, mother of dragons, breaker of chains." "I know your titles," Jon said quietly. "We have need of all of them." He gestured to the frozen hell behind him. "The dead are here." She looked, and her breath caught at the pale horizon swarming with whites. "Then let me burn them." Stannis arrived, Lightbringer sheathed at hip. He regarded her with the air of a man weighing iron. "We strike at dawn." He drew the sword. In Dragonfire's reflected glow, the blade flickered brighter, as if awakening. Daenerys' eyes widened. "Lightbringer," she murmured. "So they say," Stannis answered. "So prophecy demands. Will you hold it with me?" Jon stepped forward. "With us," he corrected. He offered Longclaw hilt first to Daenerys. Ice and fire together. She accepted the sword. The three moved closer, forming a triangle, blades crossing. In the void between their weapons, a light bloomed, cool blue from Longclaw's Valyrian edge, crimson from Lightbringer, gold from Drogon's smoldering breath. The lights braided into a single white glare that shot skyward like a pillar, piercing storm clouds. Snowflakes melted in its path, and the faintest hint of dawn painted the eastern rim, though night still reigned. On the parapets, men cried out. Whites recoiled as if struck. Even the Night King paused, tilting crown. Arya saw the pillar and felt a thrum under her feet, as though the wall itself hummed approval. She clutched needle, her heart suddenly lighter. Inside Eastwatch's war room, Tyrion clattered through the door soaking wet, three baby dragons perched on his shoulders, Yora right behind nursing cracked ribs. Guards gaped. Tyrion grinned. "Sorry to intrude, heard you like fire." "I brought matches." Daenerys' face split to joy and relief. She scooped Tyrion in embrace, whispering thanks. The hatchlings squeaked. Stannis eyed them warily. Yora bowed low to his queen before removing the crate's lid, revealing two unhatched eggs, one obsidian gray, one pale blue, recovered from Valyria's abyss. Melisandre entered, face gaunt but determined. She knelt before the unbroken eggs. Dragons yet to be born will lend strength once kings and queens lend blood. But tonight, these three shall suffice. Tyrion coughed. Suffice for what? To finish forging Lightbringer. She gestured to hearth. The blade must be tempered in living flame of monsters born of Valyria. 3 breaths for 3 bearers. Daenerys approached the hearth, drawing the sword with slow care. She slashed palm lightly, blood dripped along the fuller. She lowered blade to the dragons. Drogon's hatchling sibling inhaled and exhaled a tiny plume over the steel. Rhaegal's newborn added green lick, the gold babe puffed pale fire. Lightbringer flashed white-hot, runes along its length blazing, edge turning almost translucent. Stannis took the sword next, letting his blood mingle. The light deepened, gaining furious heartbeat glow. He passed it to Jon, who gritted teeth and sliced his already bruised arm. The blade's glow blazed brilliant white this time, luminous as noonday sun. Everyone shielded eyes. When the radiance dimmed, Lightbringer rested in Jon's hands. The blade no longer flickered, pure white flame ran along its length, silent but potent. Stannis nodded reluctantly. Azor Ahai is no single man, he admitted. Prophecy was shard of truth splintered. It takes 3. Or more yet, Melisandre whispered. Jon lifted the sword. He felt no burn though heat thrummed. He sheathed it. Save strength until dawn. We ride at first light. Dawn came amid swirling storm, sky bruised. The Night King advanced personally at the army's center. He carried a noose spear forged overnight from black ice etched with lines of starlight. Beside him lumbered undead giants dragging chains hitched to a monstrous war mammoth riddled with arrows. Behind, whites formed ranks 10 deep, their roar a deep reverberation. On the wall's ramparts, archers knocked dragon glass arrows tipped with wildfire globes courtesy of Cersei's stolen casks. Davos led the ignition teams, torches ready. The Brotherhood manned trebuchets armed with barrels of green fire. Jon, Daenerys, and Stannis stood above the gate, Lightbringer blazing between them. Dragons circled overhead. Tyrion, mounted behind a scouting saddle, clung to Drogon's collar, directing fire with a brass horn. The first volley of wildfire arrows loosed, tracing emerald arcs that burst among the leading dead ranks, igniting them in ghastly green conflagrations. The giants pushed through, bathed in false spring, their bodies smoldering to bone yet still moving. Dragons swooped, unleashing torrents of scarlet flame. Ice spiders melted, wyvern skeletons collapsed to ash. But the Night King raised his spear and hurled it at Viserion aloft. The dragon banked, but the spear clipped its wing. Blue fire erupted where it hit, frost spreading. Viserion shrieked, spiraling. Drogon dove, interposing between spear shards and the wounded sibling. Tyrion nearly lost grip as Drogon's back buffeted by crosswind. Below, Stannis signaled and the inner gate flew wide. A wedge of armored cavalry burst forth. Stannis's remaining knights, wildling raiders under Tormund Giant's bane, and Brotherhood riders carrying flaming swords. They plowed into the dead line across icy ground, Lightbringer's white fire at their head. Jon rode at point astride a great gray warhorse, blade streaming light that vaporized undead in its path. Daenerys hovered on Drogon, sweeping flame to carve corridors of safety for the riders. Stannis stayed at the wall, coordinating catapult fire. Melisandre stood at his flank, eyes white, summoning gusts of warm wind that fanned dragonfire but left arrows unaffected. The melee became chaos, white fire slicing, green fire exploding, red fire fountaining, and blue fire spearing back. The Night King stepped through conflagration untouched, eyes fixed on Jon. He drew a longsword of obsidian black, edges rimed in etheric frost. Each step froze ground beneath. He and Jon met in the centermost churn of battle. Longclaw hung at Jon's hip, he gripped Lightbringer two-handed. Blue and white blades clashed, light against void. Sparks falling became snowflakes that sizzled on earth. The Night King's strength was monstrous. Jon's arms shook, but flame whipped around the sword like living thing, parrying. He recalled every lesson from Castle Black: meet the blow, turn it, use his fury against him. Yet this foe did not tire. Nearby, Arya fought needle to needle with undead lancers, her glass dagger punching hearts to smoke. She saw Jon falter. She veered, sprinting across corpses, leaping onto a dead giant's back, balancing along its spine until she hurled herself at the Night King's flank. Her dragonglass dagger bit into blue armor, shattering a shoulder plate. The Night King spun with impossible speed, backhanding her. She flew, landing sprawled, breath hammered from lungs. Jon exploited the opening, driving Lightbringer into the fissure Arya's strike created. The sword plunged deep, white fire flared inside the Night King's chest. For heartbeat nothing happened, then cracks radiated over his body like lightning across glass. A howl erupted, wind shrieking through dead throats. The Night King staggered. Yet he did not fall. Icy tendrils wrapped Lightbringer, snuffing flame. Jon's eyes widened. Prophecy had lied? Or incomplete? Stannis, still atop the wall, saw the stalemate. Beside him Melisandre gasped, clutching a chest. Too much ice. Not enough fur. The flame must be fed again, willingly. Stannis turned to her. Use me. No, she shook head. The king's blood is spent. The fire seeks innocence now, pure flame. Stannis stared at the distant ship cabin where Shireen watched battle from porthole. He bowed his head. Then he strode to the edge of the parapet, raised voice booming, "Princess." To me. Men gaped as Shireen emerged onto deck. Her father's signal drifted across wind, she understood. She climbed ladder to gangplank, walked across the ice pier, up stone stair, face calm. Davos tried to bar her, but she placed hand on his bandaged wrist. "Trust," she whispered. He sank to knees in despair. Atop the wall Stannis knelt before his daughter. "I cannot order this," he rasped. "But the world." Shireen touched his bearded cheek. "I know, father." She turned to Melisandre. "I will not burn," you said. The red woman's eyes spilled tears. "You will pass through fire and not burn," she vowed. They led Shireen to the brazier once used for signal fires. Melisandre anointed her brow with oil charm, murmured prayer. Shireen stepped into the brazier. Flames engulfed, but she did not scream. She gasped as warmth enveloped her. The fire whirled around her like cloak. Melisandre sliced the princess's palm, blood hissed in flame, turning it pure white. The inferno leapt heavenward, forming a column mirrored above Jon and the Night King. On the field Lightbringer flared anew, white flame roaring. The Night King's ice cracked deeper. Jon roared and drove sword through, splitting foe to shards. Blue light shot skyward, then collapsed inward like dying star. Frost exploded, whites collapsing lifeless, bonds severed. Giants toppled. Wyvern bones crumbled. Silence fell. Jon sagged. Arya reached him, helping stand. Lightbringer's fire dimmed to steady glow. On the wall Stannis pulled Shireen from brazier, flames died, leaving her untouched, skin glowing with some inner light. The battle's roar receded, replaced by ragged cheers rising from living throats. Dragons wheeled overhead triumphant. Davos wept openly, arms around the princess. Melisandre sank to knees, whispering thanks to her god. But prophecy had one more verse. From the shards of the Night King's armor pooled dark mist, whirling, condensing into shape, smaller, indistinct. A boy's silhouette with eyes of star white. Bran Stark's raven mind felt a pull. In Winterfell's gods would he convulsed, realizing a remnant of the great other lingered, seeking host. On the field Jon sensed the change. He raised Lightbringer, but the shade slid away, vanishing into crack beneath Glacier. The ground trembled. Melisandre felt it too. The heart is shattered, but the shadow flees beyond ice, she warned. The long night is broken, not slain. Stannis consulted with Daenerys and Jon. We ride, Jon said, into the lands of always winter. Finish this revenant before dawn's light fades. Daenerys mounted Drogon. Stannis called for reserves. Arya volunteered. Tyrion, clutching black hatchling perched on shoulder, sighed. Swords to the north, queens to the south. Dwarfs keep advisors. He saluted. Jon took Lightbringer, Daenerys her dragons, Stannis his knights, and they began the final pursuit beyond maps, into the white wilderness where the first long night had been born. Ravens circled overhead, carrying tale of dawn's victory and the dawn yet to claim. Eastwatch's walls held, broken yet unbowed. Shireen watched her father's riders disappear into blizzard, her hand blazing faintly with unconsumed fire that the wind could not snuff. She smiled and whispered a promise to the Lord of Light: if winners write songs, let them remember the girl who burned without burning. And somewhere, far ahead, the shadow of night fled through the snow-haunted valleys, seeking a final refuge against the blaze that now hunted it. A killing calm settled over the ruins of the battlefield once the uproar of victory faded. Men dragged the dead, friend and foe alike, into heaps to await pyres. Wounded groaned in every corner. Wind prowled through shattered barricades, scattering black feathers from broken quarrels. The wall still loomed, its ancient face split and glazed with frost glass, but no fresh cracks echoed through its belly, and the great stones had ceased their shuddering. Eastwatch's defenders clung to the fragile quiet much as a drowning man clings to floating timber, yet every heartbeat reminded them this peace was provisional. Jon Snow refused to rest. Sweat had frozen hard into his hair, turning it to brittle strands that snapped when he tossed his head, and the blood on his cheek had dried to a mask. Lightbringer still glimmered at his side beneath a crust of rime. The sword's white fire no longer flared, but a faint inner glow seeped along its fuller with every pulse of Jon's racing blood. At the foot of the wall, he supervised ration wagons for the vanguard. 2 days' fare only, salted boar and unleavened oatcakes, enough to keep dozens alive through their pursuit. A courier hurried toward him, breath pluming in the icy dawn. The queen is readying her beasts, he reported. And Lord Tormund has roused near 1,000 free folk spears for the march. Ser Davos insists you eat before you ride. Tell Davos I will, Jon said, though he had no appetite. He dismissed the boy and crossed the trampled yard to where Arya sat on a stump, tying an extra length of dragonglass to the pommel of her dagger. Needle lay across her lap. She rubbed a whetstone along its edge with deft strokes so practiced the motion seemed unconscious. Are you certain about this? Jon asked. I'm not staying behind while the last shadow's loose, Arya replied. She tested Needle's tip against her thumb and grunted approval. Mother, Lady Stoneheart, rides too. Whatever's left of her wants vengeance. Jon did not argue. He touched the crown of her head. See the pyres before we leave. Say goodbye properly this time. Arya's gray eyes flicked to where Gendry and a handful of Brotherhood men loaded bodies atop carts, soldiers she had fought beside through the long night. She gave a short nod. 5 minutes. Then I'm saddling Horseface. Don't leave without me. High atop a tower built more for gulls than for men, Melisandre stood barefoot in frost, staring north across an endless glacier plain that shimmered pink beneath the rising sun. Shireen Baratheon knelt beside her, rocking on her heels, the new warm glow in her scarred palm reflected in her eyes. This light in me, Shireen said softly, it hums. I feel as though I swallowed one of your rubies. The flame of a willing heart burns truer than any gemstone, Melisandre answered. Her face was utterly exhausted, deep grooves cut beneath each eye, her lips cracked, nails rimmed in soot. In time the heat will fade. You must rest. But father needs us. Melisandre knelt, laying a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. Your father carries a king's duty. You have already given enough. True victory now lies beyond mortal flame, beyond swords and horns. It lies where a mind must war within the weirwood roots. The three-eyed raven, Shireen murmured the old tales Bran had once whispered to her during their lonely moments in Dragonstone's library. Yes, Brandon Stark will meet whatever last shard of the great other still stirs. We, meanwhile, must keep the bodies safe from any new puppeteer. The Red Woman rose, her joints popping. Jon Snow's sword will sever the shadow if Bran survives. That is the only path I see. Shireen studied the horizon. Somewhere out there her father would ride into snow so deep it had swallowed entire kingdoms in elder days. He'll come back, she said firmly. Melisandre managed a weary smile. If light endures, yes. Stannis gathered his captains in the half-collapsed sept that served as Eastwatch's hall. Light slanted through holes in the roof, stippling frozen flagstones. He stood at the head of a map spread across a salvaged door. The northern extremes beyond the wall, Frostfangs, then the icy wastes, sketched by maesters centuries deceased. Few folk south of the frozen shore knew whether those paths remained true, yet Stannis plotted a straight course all the same. We ride in 3 columns, he declared, voice rasping. My cavalry on the left flank, the wildling host under Tormund giants baying down the center, the Queen's dragons on our right, ranging overhead. He turned toward Daenerys, who leaned against a broken pillar in silver-trimmed furs, platinum hair braided tight for speed. 2 hatchlings perched on her shoulders, smoky coils of steam curling from tiny nostrils. Your rangers in flight will scour for crevasses and ambushes. Drogon will carry me, she said. Rhaegal can bear a scout, Viserion is healing. We'll lash a howdah to Rhaegal's back for my eyes, Tyrion volunteered, stepping from behind Yora. Though I think I've filled my yearly quota for flight. Ser Davos, brow corrugated, drummed fingers along the map edge. We'll be 40 leagues from any true refuge. Even dragons cannot conjure firewood. We must plan for cold. Cold is better than death, Stannis snapped. And death is what rides north if we delay. Jon arrived, cloak dusted with frost, Lightbringer glowing faintly through scabbard slit. He surveyed the captains, then the map. The shadow fled deeper than the Frostfangs. My brother dreamed of a black valley called Thrymheim, a hollow in the heart of a glacier older than men. That's where it will hide, where it was born. A hush fell. No chronicler had ever charted Thrymheim, yet none doubted Bran's vision. Then we set our compass on that hollow, Stannis agreed. He tapped the northernmost blank of canvas. If any survive to plant a banner there, we finish this war. Daenerys nodded. And if the last shadow slips away again, then we chase, Jon said simply. Within hours, chaos churned beneath the wall's shadow. Smiths shoeing destriers with ice cleats, free folk stacking whale oil casks onto sledges, stark men mending harnesses with gusts of white breath. Crows winged east with letters for the Shadow Tower to guard the wall's remaining breaches. Ravens flapped south carrying word to Winterfell and White Harbor that the long night's heart might yet beat. Jaime Lannister arrived on a lathered chestnut, leading 200 gold and crimson riders. He traded uneasy stares with Jon. The Kingslayer's armor still bore Lannister lion. Stark men spat at his horse's hooves, but Jon greeted him with curt respect. You swore to ride north, Jon said. Keep that oath and this fight is ours. I'm done with false vows, Jaime answered, dismounting. Where you go, I go. Tormund hooted laughter. A lion among wolves and dragon queen's fire cats. Good. More meat. Jaime eyed the burly giant of a free folk chieftain skeptically but shook the offered hand. Sansa and Brienne caught up mid-preparations. Sansa's cheeks were raw from wind, auburn hair tucked under a hood of dire wolf fur. Rumors say my brothers lead this hunt, she said quietly as she approached Jon. You're to kill death itself, and I'm to remain behind? Jon embraced her. You'll rule in my stead if I fall. When you return, she corrected. And you will. She fixed Jaime with sharp eyes. Ser keep my brother alive. He'll likely be keeping me alive, Jaime muttered. Brienne joined Tormund at the center ranks. Their banter, half-flirt, half-threat, sent uneasy smiles along the line. Even Lady Stoneheart croaked assent as she rode her gaunt piebald into the formation, the Brotherhood's flaming swords bobbing behind her like will-o-wisps. The column left Eastwatch at noon. Sunlight broke through shredded clouds in shafts of gold, but the cold only sharpened. The wall dwindled behind them, first like a city skyline, then a pale tooth upon the horizon, and finally a mere suggestion of vertical light where sky met snow. Hours stretched into an afternoon of trudging. The land rose and fell in shallow waves coated with wind-sculpted ice. Dragons glided overhead, Drogon red-black against sun, regal green-gold, Viserion limping along on pale wings, trailing frost from rent membranes. Mounted below, flocking between sledges, rode a hodgepodge of Westeros, black cloaks, crimson cloaks, ragged free-folk pelts, Dornish scarves, northern mail, all stumbling in single purpose. As dusk bled across the wastes, they made camp on a wind-sheltered plateau. No trees grew for leagues, so dragonfire turned snowmelt pooled in hollows to steam, and hot stones heated tents. Tyrion supervised stew. Meager hare meat boiled in wine and snowmelt, spiced with dried basil the queen's fleet had carried from Essos. He served bowls to Yora and Davos. Strange table fellows, Davos mused, eyeing the Sellsword and the imp. Nights like these I care little for banners, Yora said. Any flag that flaps still beats the shrouds we left behind. Tyrion sipped bubbling broth. A stirring toast, he said. Shall we toast no flags at all? They shrugged and clinked bowls. Elsewhere, Arya sat beside Lady Stoneheart, who rarely spoke except in a hoarse rasp. The resurrected mother studied her daughter's face with eyes full of vengeance turned vague by weary triumph. Arya pulled her hood nearer. Keep your sword ready, she murmured. Dead things spook the living. Stoneheart nodded, fingering the scar at her throat. Jon and Daenerys lay beneath a canvas shelter near Drogon, whose wing served as a windbreak. They studied Bran's rough sketches, spirals and weirwood roots scribbled in charcoal. Daenerys traced a coil. My family's ancient lore speaks of the ghost grass that glows where night is deepest. I think your brother's valley lies beyond that. Dragons have never flown so far. Dragons never had such need, Jon answered. Lightbringer grows stronger as we move. Every mile north draws us nearer to the root of darkness. What if the sword consumes you? Then take it from my hands and finish the task. He met her violet eyes. Promise. She closed her fingers over his. I will, but you will wield it yet. 3 days passed in bitter travel. The Frostfang foothills reared like broken jaws ahead, serrated ridges oozing fog. Wind screamed through gaps so fiercely that voices vanished on first syllable. Raptors the size of swans, stark children called them ice eagles, circled overhead, waiting for stragglers to falter. They devoured a Lannister outrider on the second night, only his pauldrons remained. On the fourth dawn Bran's raven appeared, banking through gusts until it landed on Jon's outstretched wrist. Its third eye glimmered green. Bran's voice rasped from its beak, storm rises. Shadow nest in Thrymheim. Hurry, brother. Then the raven slumped ordinary again and flitted away south. They pressed harder. Horses snorted white plumes. Men half froze on the march. Jaime lost sensation in his stump arm, Arya's lips cracked bloody. Even the dragons tired, their wing beats slower. Only Lightbringer seemed unbothered, its aura brightening incrementally with every half-league. When full night came, the blade cast enough light to guide the vanguard across ravines. On the sixth morning they spied black spires of ice jutting from a yawning crater, winds whirled downward into gloom. Here lay Thrymheim. A hush fell across the army. Daenerys circled above, scouting the pit's fringes. Smoke trickled from fissures, no ordinary fire. Smoke that drifted contrary to wind, rewriting itself into unnatural shapes. Downdrafts rattled armor. Stannis dismounted before the rim. We go on foot, he commanded. Cavalry cannot traverse that maze. Davos objected, but a fresh tremor shook the ground. The glacier cracks, Melisandre warned. Leave horses. They advanced in narrow file, Jon and Daenerys at the spearhead, Lightbringer glowing bright as full moon. Jaime and Brienne bore standard duty, direwolf entwined with stag and three-headed dragon fused into one crest. Lady Stoneheart marched close behind, brotherhood flames guttering. Tormund's free folk fanned along ridges with dragoglass axes. Dragons soared overhead, their roar reverberating down icy walls. The descent proved harrowing, stone staircases half-eroded, bridges of hoarfrost carrying men across chasms into blackness. On the seventh such bridge, an ice-eagle dove gouging claws across Regal's flank. Tyrion clung to harness, directing dragonfire that vaporized the bird in a puff of steam. Regal righted, but the commotion loosed a chunk of overhang. It crashed onto the bridge behind Jaime's contingent, splitting the tail end from main force. 5 Lannisters plunged into depthless void. Jaime swore. Brienne tossed him a rope. They spanned the fractured gap to reunite. Yet every stumble cost precious lantern oil. and cold gnawed deeper. Finally, they reached the valley floor. A bowl of black ice ringed by jagged teeth of glacier hundreds of feet high. No life stirred, not even the restless dead. Only a low thrumming pulsed through soles of their boots, like the heartbeat of a slumbering colossus. John felt Lightbringer vibrate. A narrow cleft at valley's center oozed pale mist. "Below," he said. Daenerys drew alongside, her hatchling dragons hissing. Stannis raised gauntlet to halt rear ranks. The sword-bearers and the seer's blood go first. 10 guards only. The rest hold here. No one argued. Jaime, Arya, Brienne, Tormund, Davos, Yora, Tyrion, Melisandre, Stoneheart, and Shireen pressed into the cleft alongside Jon and Daenerys. Drogon remained above, wings mantling the valley mouth, while Rhaegal perched on a ridge to breathe green flame at any shadow or raptor. Viserion, still wounded, huddled under a precipice, dripping blue gore but watchful. The path narrowed. Ice walls glowed faintly, lit internally by trapped veins of crystalline quartz. As they followed the pulse downward, shapes emerged inside those walls, fossilized faces screaming in perpetual silence, frozen first men, children of the forest, antler-crowned giants. Their eyes followed the intruders with accusing glitter. Tyrion muttered, "A congregation of victims. Lovely artwork. Graves of the forgotten," Melisandre observed. "Every age leaves bones for the next." They reached a door of solid ice carved with spiral sigils. Jon brushed Lightbringer along the seam. White fire sank in lines spreading like molten lead. The door dissolved, leaving only drifting snow dust. Beyond lay a cavern of impossible scale. Walls soared up and away, lost in shadows, while the floor plunged, forming a sheer pit whose bottom swallowed light. Across that abyss, a slender bridge spanned to a dais floating on a column of black ice. And on the dais stood the shadow, no longer amorphous but coalesced into a boy of perhaps 12 winters, robe of swirling midnight, hair a tangle of frost. The remnants of the Night King's essence. His eyes glowed star-white. No pupil, no mercy. Shireen trembled but stepped beside Jon. "He feels cold," she whispered, "like 1,000 winters trying to speak." The shadow lifted a hand. A dozen wraiths rose at the bridge's far end, pale forms armored with cracked frostglass. They carried spears of midnight. Jon drew Lightbringer. The sword blazed brighter than ever, sunlight bottled into steel. He stepped onto the bridge, followed by Daenerys, Arya, Jaime, Brienne. The others covered flanks with bows and firepots. As they advanced, the shadow spoke not in words but in symbols that hammered against minds. Tyrion staggered under the barrage, clutching temples. Davos fell to a knee. Melisandre bit her tongue until blood ran. The message was simple: turn back. Jon answered with raw will, never. The wraith phalanx surged. Lightbringer clashed with the first spear, exploding it into diamond dust. Arya darted under a second thrust, her dragonglass dagger punching into the wraith's belly. It burst like brittle glass, scattering shards across the bridge. Jaime parried another, golden hand absorbing impact before Brienne's longsword cleaved the wraith's head. Yet for each destroyed, another materialized, drawn from the pit's bottom like memories surfacing. The air chilled further. Daenerys flung a hatchling skyward, the tiny dragon screeched, exhaling a jet of flame that wrapped 3 wraiths, melting them to puddles that hissed over the ice. Jon locked blades with the tallest wraith, its spear twisted into ribbons around Lightbringer's heat. He shoved forward, sending the creature spinning into oblivion. But behind it the Shadow Boy raised both arms, a gust of absolute cold blew down the bridge. Each hero staggered. Frost-crusted Lightbringer's flame. Daenerys's breath froze in her throat. Melisandre shouted a prayer. Shireen's palm flared white. Heat blossomed, pushing back the gale long enough for Jon to charge. He sprinted the final length alone as the others grappled fresh wraiths. The shadow watched, expression unreadable. Lightbringer glowed so bright it cast twin shadows on the cavern walls. Jon halted before the dais. "Your war is over," he said, voice hoarse. The shadow tilted its head. Memories of the Night King flickered, of betrayal by men and children alike, of centuries entombed in ice, of fated resurrection. It reached out, hand small, palm open. Jon hesitated. Then he lowered Lightbringer's tip, resting it against the dais. "Peace," he murmured. "Or ending." Behind him Arya dispatched the last wraith. Silence reigned but for Tormund's distant bellow and a dragon's roar overhead. The shadow glanced past Jon at Shireen glowing white on the far side of the bridge. He stretched a finger toward her. Jon stepped between. The shadow's finger touched Lightbringer's hilt instead. The sword burst into a vertical column of light so intense it eclipsed thought. Jon felt weightless, falling upward. He saw Bran, miles away, inside tangled roots, eyes white, chanting words of old tongue, weaving living veils of weirwood memory around the shade. The column subsided. The Shadow Boy was gone. In its place lay a single shard of clear ice no larger than a child's tooth. Lightbringer's blade had turned silver steel, the white flame extinguished yet humming within, silent lightning waiting for call. Jon exhaled. He collected the shard in a cloth. It radiated cold but did not sting. The pit's thrumming ceased. Wraith dust drifted into the abyss. On the far bank Daenerys collapsed to one knee, exhausted. Jaime and Brienne steadied her. Arya limped forward with bleeding forearm. Melisandre stepped to the dais edge. "It is bound," she declared, voice echoing strangely. "Bran's roots hold the last scrap of the great other until time itself rots. The long night is finished." No one cheered. Sudden relief replaced exultation. They were too tired, too aware of what it had taken. Jon slid Lightbringer back into scabbard. Metal as he touched looked plain, but still warm. He led them back across the bridge. They emerged from the cleft beneath an eerie sky streaked with greens and violets. Drogon landed with thunderous gust, and Rhaegal roared triumph. From the valley rim free folk hoisted axes. Brotherhood swords blazed. Lannister horns blew. Stannis kept his composure, though a tremor shook his shoulders. He turned to face his daughter climbing toward him, Shireen's white palm fading to ordinary flesh. Father and child embraced. Jon spoke so all could hear. "The Night King is no more. The shadow is bound. Dawn truly rises." Cheers swept the valley then, wave on wave until even the silent glacier seemed to echo. Arya laughed for the first time in years, tears freezing on lashes. Tyrion slumped against Yora, muttering dry witticisms about writing the song with himself as hero. Daenerys laid a hand on Jon's shoulder. "Now we rebuild. And guard," he said. "Evil returns when memory fades." The journey south was slower but lighter. Where they passed, winter's grip loosened fractionally, skies shed fewer flakes, the wind lost some knife edge. At Eastwatch, ravens soared as scouts reported the dead across Westeros collapsed inert. Villages once haunted by whites now found only empty armor and thawing corpses. From King's Landing, Cersei's envoys arrived suing for peace under white banners. Jaime confronted his sister in the throne room weeks later, Lightbringer's silver scabbard visible at his hip. Cersei surrendered the crown to Daenerys in exchange for her child's safety. The breaker of chains declined, declaring instead a great council to choose rulers of 7 kingdoms anew. Men and women who had bled together under no flag. Spring came early. Fields outside Winterfell sprouted green before the equinox. Bran woke from his coma, eyes gentle, memories of his duel within, roots hazy but serene. He named the newborn shoots Dawnflowers. Melisandre sailed east, her purpose complete. Legend claimed red sails were later sighted near S High, though none confirmed. Stannis retired to Storm's End with Shireen and allowed his bannermen to elect her heir to the new council. He never again drew the sword, he said it belonged to the realm. Jon hid Lightbringer inside Winterfell's crypt beside the statue of Lyanna Fire sleeping under stone, a warning and a promise. Arya watched him seal the niche. She quipped that if winter returned they'd know where to shop for torches. They shared a smile rare and true. Daenerys guided her dragons across Westeros, helping sow melted ice for river surges. Their flame turned to tilling soil instead of war. The hatchlings grew. Rhaegal healed. Tyrion hosted the first Moot of Realms in Old Town, where maesters of every bloodline debated how to preserve the memory of what nearly ended the world. They forged glass tablets etched in 4 languages describing the siege of Thrymheim. One they buried beneath the wall, one beneath Dragaglass Hill on Dragonstone, one beneath the Heart Tree at Winterfell. The last Tyrion kept, promising to drop it on anyone who claimed prophecies were children's tales. Years later, children at Winterfell would trace the inscription on the crypt's hidden tablet. True dawn is the flame born of many hearts. They would whisper stories of the day the Night King shattered, of the girl who burned without burning, of the three who bore Lightbringer. And in their telling, they would remember, so darkness could never again creep unseen through forgotten roots. And somewhere far to the north, under an aurora-painted sky, a tiny shard of clear ice still pulsed once each century, a heartbeat so faint no air might catch it. On the day it ceased forever, the last traces of the long night would fade into myth. Ash drifted across the godwood like late snow, settling on the emerald tips of dawnflowers that pushed defiantly through half-thawed loam. Ned Stark's statue stood watch over the blooming isle, its stone sword glinting faintly in morning light. Jon Snow paused beneath the weirwood's pale canopy and drew a slow breath, savoring the mingled scents of sap, damp earth, and distant hearth smoke. So many seasons had passed since he last tasted air that carried no undertone of death. Even now, the quiet felt fragile, as if one errant step might wake the sleeping storm again, but each bird call and squirrel chatter whispered that spring truly meant to linger. Ghost padded ahead, nose twitching at every strange scent. A pair of wolf pups, offspring of the dire wolf Lady Sansa had raised in secret, tumbled after Ghost, nipping his tail. Jon allowed himself a smile. However heavy his memories, life kept sprouting in unlikely places. The Night King's shadow no longer haunted his dreams. Instead, he saw Shireen's tiny, glowing palm, Bran's serene gaze fixed on some horizon no one else could see, Daenerys's hair whipping against the dawn as dragons rose behind her like new suns. He reached the pond at the Godswood's heart and knelt, cupping water in scarred hands. The reflection that greeted him bore new lines around the eyes and a faint silvering at the temples. Marks of a man far older than his years. He had not sheathed Lightbringer since sealing it beneath the crypt. Even hidden, the sword's faint hum pulsed through Winterfell's stones, a heartbeat that joined itself to the castle's long dormant veins. Jon listened for it now, and felt reassured when it echoed, soft and steady. He bowed to the heart tree, thanked the old gods for silence, and rose to meet the living realm again. Outside the Godswood gate, Arya leaned against a moss-touched wall, leather jerkin half-laced, hair chopped shorter than before. Practical length for a traveler preparing yet another road. She flipped a coin across her knuckles, letting it dance from finger to finger with effortless grace. "Thought you'd never leave that tree," she teased. "It listens better than people," Jon replied. "True," she agreed, twirling the coin before tucking it into her boot. "But we've a council meeting in half an hour and the lords' tongues wag even when they're not heard. Best show them the king in the north still breathes." Jon raised a brow. "Didn't I abdicate 5 times already?" "Only 4, Arya grinned. "And each time they keep writing your name in the minutes. Faces change, signatures stay. You're stuck." Jon snorted. "Says the woman who refuses any title. I have one, no one. Hard to print on parchments, though." She gestured at the courtyard. "Come on. Tyrion made pies. 7 save us." They walked side by side through Winterfell's lively bustle. The rebuilt castle bristled with fresh timber and newly quarried stone. Masons sang bawdy songs while setting roof tiles. Woman-smiths hammered shaped rings into lighter breastplates designed by Gendry to replace heavier southern steel. Children racing between workshops shrieked laughter. A free folk trader bartered mammoth hides with a Dornish dye merchant near the kennels. Diversity seemed impossible weeks earlier, yet now it was the cadence of daily life. At the great hall doors, Ser Brienne stood sentinel. Her white cloak bore no Lannister crimson nor Stark gray, only a plain silver horizon stitched above a green field. Tartha's colors redesigned to symbolize peace. Next to her loomed Tormund Giantsbane, beard braided with wildflowers that matched Brienne's cloak trim. He winked when Arya passed. "Council about to start," he rumbled. "The queen's already inside, and the imp is threatening to stab anyone who mispronounces Dawnflower again." "Gods forbid," Jon said, stepping through. The hall's timber vault soared above banners of every house that had signed the Pact of New Dawn, Stark direwolf entwined with Targaryen dragon, Mormont she-bear clutching a budding weirwood branch, even a small golden lion gleamed on a white field. Jaime's personal sigil since he renounced Casterly Rock. Benches crowded with envoys, maesters, and whispered rumors. At the dais, Daenerys spoke quietly with Sansa, their heads bowed over parchment lists. Regal's scarred form curled outside a high-arched window, sunning battered wings. Every few moments he snorted a smoke ring shaped like question marks. Tyrion paced the lower aisle waving a pastry-laden ladle, shoes dusted in flour. He spotted Jon and waved him closer. "Try one," he urged. "Lemon and blackberries." Even the Night King would have surrendered for these. Jon bit into flaky crust, sugar melted on his tongue, tartness chasing sweet. "7 hells, Tyrion. What scheming motivates such perfection?" "Bribing the nobles to agree on grain tariffs." The dwarf winked. "Pay them in sugar before you tax their wheat, that's my motto." A gong sounded. Maester Samwell Tarly, robes cinched around new circumference, rapped his staff on the floor. "Lords and ladies, by the authority vested in the Regent Council of the North and Free Realms, we convene the 22nd Assembly of New Dawn." He beamed at Jon, then cleared his throat and began reading. Sam's voice carried notes of scholarly serenity, but the topics remained those of a land unhealed: crop rotations, broken holdfasts, plague watch on the southern rivers where Cersei's wildfire toxins once seeped. Jon listened, offering measured input. He delegated timber quotas to Lord Glover, reserved iron shipments for rebuilding coastal towers, and proposed a joint harbor with White Harbor to expedite SOC trade. When arguments sputtered into petty quarrels, he stabbed them with a stern glare. When despair crept, he reminded them of valleys once void of life now filled with dawnflowers. Daenerys backed fiscal plans with dragon intimidation and reasoned appeals, twin forces few dared oppose. Sansa navigated social grievances, orphans granted land, free folk villages integrated into Stark territories under mutual oath. Hours later, parchment stacks dwindled. Tyrion unrolled a final scroll, face somber. "One last petition," he announced. "From King's Landing's Provisional Council, Qyburn and Maester Orwyle request permission to ship wildfire residue north for safe disposal. They claim the cellars remain unstable despite scouring." Murmurs erupted. Gendry shook his head. Lady Stoneheart leaned stiffly against a pillar, throat scar-puckering as she rasped dissent. Sansa looked to Jon. "We cannot risk transporting that poison." Jon frowned. "Nor letting it sit beneath a city of thousands." He turned to Daenerys. Her face reflected flickering torchlight. Memories of green fire over Blackwater still haunted her. She sighed. "Tell them," she said, voice level, "to open those cellars to Regal. No shipping. Dragonfire renders wildfire inert. 3 passes should suffice." Some gasped, but Tyrion nodded. "I will draft a reply." His quill scratched. Council adjourned. Delegates filed out in clumps. Jon lingered by the hearth where logs crackled. Warmth soothed residual ache in sword arm. Daenerys approached. "You still look for threats," she observed. "Habit," Jon admitted. "And the shard. I keep feeling it." He tapped tunic pocket where the tiny tooth of pure ice lay wrapped in wool. Bran had insisted they store it in living space, not crypt. They needed to watch for any change. So far, it remained dormant. "Ice remembers," she mused. "But we'll remember too." She placed her hand over his pocket, gentle. "Come. There's a surprise in the training yard." He followed. Outside, afternoon sun glinted off melted towers. In the yard, children clustered around Davos, who balanced a small book on one palm. Shireen stood beside him, cheeks flushed with excitement. She raised a finger to hush them as Jon emerged. "Lord Snow," she called, "would you honor our first lesson?" Jon blinked. "Lesson?" Shireen held up the book, crude wooden covers, pages stitched with twine. On the front, a stylized sunburst pierced a snarling skull of ice. Below, bold letters read "The Long Night, a tale for every child." Illustrations spilled across the open page: Lady Lyanna clad in wolf pelt, 3 dragons encircling a blazing sword, tiny Shireen cupping a white flame. "It's for the small folk," she explained, "so they never forget how we beat the dark." Maester Sam helped write it. Gendry carved the blocks. "We'll print thousands." Jon's throat tightened. He knelt, accepting the book. Inside, alongside heroic scenes, text threaded simple lessons: share fire, guard one another, remember old stories. On the final page, a blank line invited each child reader to sign their name under the line "Guardian of the Dawn." He looked at Shireen, the girl who burned without burning, and gently closed the cover. "I'm honored," he said, "but you'll teach better than I." She smiled, glow fading from her palm yet ember in her eyes. "We teach together." They began. Davos recited lines, Shireen displayed pictures, Jon demonstrated sword stances with dulled practice steel, Arya snuck behind, showing stealth footwork, even Tyrion piped in, turning moral lessons into riddles for quickwits. Children giggled, mimicked, stumbled, rose again. Each time a dawnflower petal drifted onto the packed dirt. That evening, John sat on the battlements alone, cloak fur wrapped against chill. Aurora ribbons blossomed overhead, remnant magic, Bran claimed, echo of the bound shadow deep under ice. Instead of dread, John felt wonder. Footsteps clicked. Jaime joined him, golden hand reflecting starlight. He leaned on the parapet regarding sky. "Wanted to see the lights once more before I leave," Jaime said. "Southbound patrol?" "Aye. Casterly Rock's mines remain half-collapsed, Lannisport starves. They need my good hand." He flexed the prosthetic. "You friends here now," John offered. "I'll return." Jaime's eyes softened. "Brienne will keep me honest." Silence fell comfortable. Then Jaime produced a small scroll. Maester Sam found mention of another sword, sister to Lightbringer. Forged in lost Valyrian holdfast, quenched in sea serpent blood. Possibly myth, but he thinks the blade may rest somewhere in the stepstones. He asked if I'd look. He smirked. "A knight's errand." John chuckled. "Careful. Quests have a habit of reshaping Kingslayers." Jaime shrugged. "Perhaps I need shaping." He extended his organic hand. John clasped it. Safe travels. Weeks stretched into months. Snowmelt fed roaring rivers, north roads softened into muddy veins crawling with caravans. At White Harbor, Lady Willa Manderley christened a new docks district, Freehold Quay reserved for free folk fishermen who traded narwhal tusk and cloudberries. In Moat Cailin, Dornish engineers and Greyjoy salvers raised a watchtower that doubled as lighthouse, its beacon fueled by a tempered wildfire derivative, safe, bright, orange as a new dawn. Harhome reopened as a free folk port, protected by Night's Watch Rangers now under Tormund's advisory council. Sansa's letters kept John apprised. Grain yields thrice previous seasons thanks to dragon-tilled fields, Tyrell seedlings thriving in winter town orchards, minor houses forging marriage alliances across once bitter borders. She closed each letter with the same line, "Hope grows like dawnflower, stubborn against the frost." John kept every parchment in a cedar chest by his bed. Autumn approached. One crisp morning Bran summoned John to the library. Books piled high like battlements, ravens perched on stands clicking beaks impatiently. Arya lounged on a table edge, tossing apples upward and slicing them midair with needle. Bran looked up from a woven tapestry, roots swirling around indistinct shapes. "The shard pulses," he said. "Not stronger. Different. It feels quiet yet purposeful." John retrieved the tooth of ice from its wool wrap. It no longer chilled his fingers. Instead, faint warmth seeped, contradictory, unsettling. Inside the clear core, a tiny dark mote drifted like dust in water. "Is it breaking free?" Arya asked. Bran shook head. "No. It's changing. Remember, the Great Other is bound in memory, not slain. Its remnants might evolve, perhaps seeking balance rather than dominion." John frowned. "Or a new host." "Or that," Bran conceded. "But I sense no malice. Only motion." Arya flipped an apple piece into her mouth, chewed thoughtfully. "We could toss it into a volcano." Bran's lips twitched. John suspected the three-eyed raven rarely smiled, but the brother he'd once known peeked through. "The shard is a seed. Destroying seeds seldom ends well. Better to plant them in known soil." "What soil?" John asked. "Here, Bran essay. ID, tapping the tapestry's center where roots tangle darkest. Under the heart tree, but not alone. We gather seeds of light too. Dawnflower bulbs, dragon-forged glass dust, water from the river that healed Nymeria's cubs. A ritual not of fire or ice but of memory and life. If the shard accepts harmony, its pulse will steady. If not," he met John's eyes, "we'll know soon enough." Plans unfolded. Sam compiled lore. Melisandre, though absent, sent scrolls from Ashai regarding binding rites. Shireen contributed songs of RH lore rewritten for gentler cadence. Davos hauled barrels of Blackwater sand to represent men's stubborn grit. Daenerys offered a single scale shed by Drogon, still warm to touch. On the equinox, beneath heart tree crimson leaves, they dug a small hollow. Children from every house gathered, each placing tokens. Ribbons, carved boats, a cracked practice sword. Bran laid the shard in center. John planted dawnflower bulbs around it. Then Shireen scattered glass dust that glittered rainbow. Daenerys poured dragon-scale-warmed river water. Melisandre's words, sung by Winter Town orphans, drifted upward. Flame remembers, ice endures, light and shadow share the song. No lightning struck, no wind howled, only leaves rustled and ravens croaked. But with each heartbeat the shard's glow waxed, then dimmed to match John's pulse, then Ryder's pulses, then stilled. Roots crept around it. Dawnflower bulbs unfurled tiny white shoots. Bran exhaled. It sleeps. Arya clapped softly. Let it snore forever, she whispered. Seasons rolled. War-scarred villages morphed into bustling towns. The Great Council matured into a living confederacy, each realm free yet allied. Daenerys traveled between strongholds, balancing dragon might with measured diplomacy. She refused a throne but accepted the title Steward of Skies, her authority limited to defending the realm's borders and overseeing wildfire disposal. Rhaegal's green fire cleansed tunnels across King's Landing. Viserion's pale flames warmed forges, crafting plowshares from broken swords. Drogon nested atop Dragonstone, occasionally visiting Winterfell to sprawl lazily in snowdrifts, baffling sheep. Tyrion wrote a hefty commentary on governance after gloom, filled with witty admonitions. He insisted on reading excerpts at feast tables until Gendry bribed a bard to set portions to bawdy verse, rendering the treatise popular among small-folk taverns. Lady Stoneheart, her rage quieted, traveled riverlands restoring bridges burned during endless wars. She rarely spoke, but when a flood threatened White River villages, she and Brotherhood crews diverted waters, saving fields. Peasants left sunflowers on her campfire ring nightly. Rumor claimed each bloom eased her ravaged throat a little more, though she never removed the scarf. Brienne became first commander of the Brotherhood Guard, a standing peacekeeping host drawn from freedmen and former sellswords. Tormund served as her northern liaison, teaching recruits to laugh while wielding axes. Their mismatched loyalty shaped a corps both feared and beloved. Shaped by necessity, the Night's Watch transformed. Once a prison of last resort, it became a voluntary order of rangers, scholars, and builders who patrolled not only the Wall, now part museum, but roamed the entire realm studying climate and magic. Their motto changed subtly: we guard, we learn, we guide. Maester Sam oversaw the new archives, mapping starfalls and dawnflower cycles, predicting weather that now grew unpredictable in warmth's return. Years passed. Snow retreated up mountains. Fields stretching from Hornwood to Duskendale glowed gold. Summer songs replaced dirges. Jon rarely reached for a sword. When he did, it was to teach youngsters defensive forms. He became more legend than lord. Not king, but caretaker. Shireen's book series multiplied, each chapter painted by local artisans, printed on cheap parchment so every home had at least one. Children debated whether Arya or Lady Stoneheart dealt the killing blow to the last wraith. Scholars debated economic impacts of dragon-tilled fields. Priests debated metaphysics of flame and frost seeds. One twilight, Jon joined Daenerys on a hill south of Winterfell where the two Kingsroads met. A stone marker stood freshly set. Here converged divided paths. Here rose new dawn. Travelers paused to scrawl names on the base. Jon traced a gloved finger over carvings: unknown merchants, orphan children, a maester from Dorne. Collective memory etched in stone. Daenerys leaned on his shoulder. The realm heals. It does. He watched golden wheat wave beneath orange sky. She turned, eyes reflecting sunset. Who are we when there's no war left to wage? Guardians, he answered. Gardeners. She laughed softly. A dragon queen gardening. Will the songs include that? They'll include whatever Tyrion finds amusing, Jon said. They walked hand in hand down the slope, discussing grain yields, hatchling training regimens, and whether dawnflowers would survive southern soils. Ahead, Winterfell's lights flickered warm, a hearth for weary travelers, a beacon for restless hearts. Above, auroras thinned to faint streaks, like brush strokes aging gracefully. Somewhere deep in the godwood, roots cradled an icy shard peacefully nestled among blooming white petals, both drawing heartbeat-gentle rhythm from the same soil. And the realm breathed, proving that even in lands birthed by blood and ruled by steel, a single dawn could blossom into many tomorrows, each brighter than the last.